Okay, we're going to get started with the meeting now. Bring it to order. Mr. Green?
Mr. Lauer.
Thank you. First, we'll stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, thank you. Okay, here we go. Roll call.
Chairman Glenn Morgan,
Here.
Vice Chair Patricia Osborne,
Here.
Reshma Ali, Carrie Lauer,
Here.
John Papagiannakis,
Here.
Jenny Rosado, Gary White.
Okay, I want to make a motion for the adoption of the minutes from the March 8th.
So moved. We need a second. Second it.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
All opposed? Carry it forward. Also, today, I'm going to be making a motion. I would like to suspend the rules for the normal order of business because we have two presentations this evening. So I'd like to make a motion for that.
So moved. I'll make a motion that we suspend the rules. I second it.
Okay? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? So moved.
And I'd like to make a motion to remove Glenn Morgan from the Genova Burns Subcommittee and add Gary White to the subcommittee.
Okay.
I'll
So
make the
moved.
motion.
Got a second?
All in favor?
Aye.
And at this point, I would like to introduce Mayor McCormick and Dan Pierre, who works with Genova Burns, and Bill Hildebrand, who works with Mercury, to give the presentation of the results of the Mercury poll survey.
Let Bill take it away.
Okay.
Well, thank you everybody for having me here tonight. My name is Bill Hildebrand. I work with a company called Mercury. We are a bipartisan public affairs firm based here in New Jersey, but we have about 20 offices, give or take, around the country and the globe, notably in New York and DC, California, Florida, as well as offices in London and Mexico City. Our work typically includes helping our clients understand public opinion, managing public affairs campaigns and messaging for our clients, which vary from nonprofits all the way up to Fortune 500 companies. And we were brought on here to help by Genova Burns to understand sort of the public opinion here in Woodbridge as it relates to core public services in the township, as well as the police department and community relations in that regard. We conducted a survey here in Woodbridge in the beginning of February, and I have a presentation that it's kind of hard to see, I guess, on the TV screens here, but I'll try and walk through it to the best of my ability for the folks in the crowd. We conducted a survey. It was a 400 sample size survey here in the township. It was fielded February 8th to 11th with a margin of error of 4.9% plus or minus. This is a pretty standard statistical sample here for a geography like Woodbridge. It was conducted through a mixed mode methodology of both phone calls and cell phone text message solicitations to try and basically get an adequate and statistically relevant sample size that is reflective of the community as a whole here in Woodbridge. 2/3 of the surveys were completed via phone. That's 1/3 via landlines, 1/3 via cell phones, and then the remaining third was conducted by text message solicitation. So 2/3 phone calls, 2/3 via cell phone, and then you can see on the right, if you're close to the TV screen, basically how our survey sample modeled the estimated population here in Woodbridge as it stands today. The reason this is relevant is just because we wanted to make sure folks understood that this is not oversampling of some, particular geography or particular demographic here in the township. It's reflective of the town as a whole. We also conducted this in we had bilingual operators. We estimated that probably 10% of the sample here would take the survey in Spanish. That was ultimately 8%. And, oftentimes the criticism we get is, well, only 400 interviews, I never got called, no one ever reached out to me. And, we listed at the bottom, we made about 15,000 attempts via our live operators between both landlines and cell phones. And, I'm sure a lot of people are, maybe thought that it was the car warranty sales calls coming through on the phone. But no, it was our professional call centers trying to make those solicitations and get that proper feedback from the township as a whole. Just in the interest of time, I'm going to jump through. We have some key findings here in the beginning, but I just wanted to jump into the data. One thing that we can do here with the survey is not only look at the top line numbers as it relates to the township as a whole, but be able to break down into different geographies in the township, between different age subsets, racial subsets, married households, single households, and so forth, various income levels. And one of the geographic breaks that we use here in the township is by ward. So for folks who may not be familiar with the ward breakouts, this is the map of the township. And so generally, the wards make up about 20% of the overall sample, give or take. So it's about 100 to 125 completed interviews in each one of these wards, which gives us the confidence to be able to look into those different neighborhoods, so to speak, to see how the different wards behave relative to the others. So I'm going to jump through the key findings here just to kind of get into the data. One of the initial questions that we asked is sort of like a boilerplate question that any survey that asks generally, how people feel. Are things going in the right direction? Are they going off on the wrong track? Here in Woodbridge, it's at a 55 right direction, 26 wrong direction. We view that as a really solid number. It's a 2-to-1 favorable rating here in the township, and you see really positive numbers, particularly in Ward 4 in Island, Ward 5 in Colonia. Seniors are really happy. African American voters are at the highest at plus 71. Same with Indian voters at plus 69. I would just show, like, as comparison, when we look at other surveys that are out there, Monmouth University is often ranked as one of the most accurate pollsters in the entire country. And they did a survey back in March, just by comparison, when asked about the country as a whole and looking at the national population, do people feel like things are going in the right track, wrong direction? And that was at a 34-61. Here in New Jersey, a similar question was asked by Fairleigh Dickinson. Pre-COVID, that number here statewide in New Jersey was at a 31-60. That has since changed, I think, as a result of just COVID-19 and the way that the governor, the perception that among voters that the government is doing a good job in handling those measures, keeping the public safe, and those numbers have really come back around now at a 55% right direction, 38% wrong direction. So it just gives you an idea of sort of where Woodbridge fits into that model, looking at state and national politics. We asked about the top issue in the township. I don't think it's a surprise probably to anyone living in New Jersey that property taxes would be the #1 issue that's ranked highest among Woodbridge residents. We see schools and education come in at #2 at 15%. And then when you get into sort of the tier 3 issues, that's when you start to see things like attracting businesses, as well as social injustice and racial inequality in the community here at 10%. There's some other issues below that, improving roads and traffic, transparency in government, and there's a ranking here below. When we get into the individual wards, the green at the top is property taxes. These are the individual neighborhoods across the township. Property taxes, again, among the highest. It is the highest in every ward among genders, no real gender splits there. In Ward 3, you do see social injustice start to peak at #2. And among the various wards, schools and education, tracking business, improving roads, some of the common issues here are pretty much consistent. When you get into the age...
Not at this time.
Not at this
Not at this
No.
time.
Clarification.
Oh.
You have to wait.
Thank you.
When we get into age breaks as well, probably not surprisingly, seniors are the most, sort of price sensitive of property taxes at 43%. But when you compare to younger voters, social injustice does start to pop up as number 2. And really it's split with a number of issues here between property taxes, social injustice, as I said, schools and education. When we move across to various racial groups and ethnic breaks, among African Americans, social injustice is the number 1 issue here in the township at 26%. It's split almost here with property taxes at 23, and then a number of issues below that as well. Among the Indian and Indian populations, you do see transparency in government pulling in at number 2. Our recommendation just to the township is, to make sure that engaging with that community and communications and building that trust is important. We then went through a ranking of a number of core services in the township, everything from the fire department, EMS, DPW, police department, parks and playgrounds. And it's hard to tell from this chart, but essentially the left side, the dark orange, is an excellent rating. The middle orange there is a very good rating, and then the lighter orange is a good rating. And we built these out so you can kind of see based on the rankings where each of those fall. So fire department's at the top, EMS followed by DPW, which I thought was pretty positive for the township given that this survey was taken right after a major snowstorm in the beginning of February. And that's the recipe for whether unplowed streets or problems with garbage, recycling, et cetera, they still rank pretty high. Police department is here at 78%. With essentially a positive score, with 19% giving it a fair or poor rating. Just moving down, there's some other issues at the bottom with senior services. It's not really that at 57% there at the bottom. It really doesn't have much to do with the fact that people disapprove of the services. It's really a greater lack of awareness about those among different demographics. When you look at seniors, they are very positive about the services that are provided in the community. The biggest negative here is really just as it relates to traffic control. We see on the right side, the 42%, that's where the real intensity, where things start to pop, where people are expressing a little bit more frustration about some of the issues here in town. As we move along, when somebody responded with a fair or poor rating, we asked them to explain that in an open-ended question. And so some of the things that popped up here, the thing that popped up most was 13% traffic problems, questions about the school and the need for improvement, just general sort of gripes about government and building and overdevelopment and roads and so forth. And so we have a ranker here. But just in the interest of time, we'll keep moving along here. We focused in on a number of questions on the police department as well. So we had a series of questions that asked about, should the township be hiring more officers? Do folks approve of, the job that they're doing, the professionalism? Are they helpful? Are they getting back to you on time? Things of this nature. And so with that, we can then compare the answers on those questions and sort of the demographic subgroups and how they respond to each of those and compare them on the various questions. So an initial question that we asked was, how important is it to you that your township continues hiring additional law enforcement officers? We see by a 62 to 16% margin that the township is ranking this as important versus not important. We see the greatest numbers in Ward 2, which is in the southern part of the township, and that women, especially more so than men, are at a plus 52 in favor of hiring more police officers in the township. We also see among African Americans that number is at a 68 to 24, and a number of the various subgroups, Hispanic, Asian, total Asian Indian and Indian populations are all pretty strong margins. When we dig a little bit deeper on this question, and I apologize, I'm going to pull apart my report here. We had a question later in the survey that asked about the question in a non-biased way about defunding the police. And so we found among those who ranked social injustice as their top issue, also supported by a slim margin, a 6-point margin by 38 to 32, the idea that we should be hiring more police officers here in the township. Among those who agreed with the policy about defunding the police, that was at a +8, 42 to 34. And the number that's really important to look at here too is that, you know, there's a high number of, on the top right for folks who can see it on the TV screen, there's a 30% that kind of rank it as neither important or unimportant. So it's a higher sort of like step back and really not taking a position on the issue per se. We see among lower income families under $60,000 per year household income are at a +55. This is a 68 to 13. And as we get higher up on the income scale, we do see that sort of gap closing about the need to hire more officers versus not. The folks who have lived here in town the longest are at, you know, a really high number, +60. That's at a 68 to 8%. We also asked about police patrols. And as you know, the researcher involved in this, I actually have no idea whether police patrols are increasing or decreasing. I think by and large, most of the township is saying that they're about the same at 72%. But you do see a small margin that's saying that they've increased versus decreased at 13 to 7. On the right side of the chart, this is a question about public safety. In general, how safe do you feel living in your area? The left side is total safe. The right side in the gray is unsafe. And then there's two bars. The dark orange is a very safe, and then a somewhat safe at the top. When we skip it, there we go. When we skip ahead and kind of look at the levels of safety in your area, I mean, it's hard to say that this number could grow any higher. I think generally people feel safe in the township. But when you look at differences in some of the different groups, you do see a slight peak in among women, among those in Colonia, and then as well as Hispanic residents who are reporting just marginally increased levels of sort of feeling unsafe in the township. As far as police patrols, we do see among those who agree with defunding the police that they are more likely to report higher levels of police patrols, as well as those who are reporting lower levels of income at 19% increase versus 5% decrease. We then went into a question asking if you as a resident had interacted with the police department at any point in the last 2 years. 40% of residents in the township are saying that they've had some interaction with the police, and we're seeing higher levels with younger voters, but less so with older voters, at 32% interacting versus 68% not. Asian Indian population is one of the lower ones. They're at 29% yes versus 71% no. And then similarly with higher income residents, we're seeing higher levels of engagement with the police department. More recent voters are by a +8 margin saying they're engaging versus those who have been here longer, which is interesting. We then asked as well, just sort of like in those interactions, the 40% who've dealt with the police department, how do they rate those interactions? Are they reporting that they're professional, timely in responding to them? Are they helpful? And you can see by the chart, the orange marker is really the positive, sort of excellent, very good rankings versus the fair, poor at the bottom. Additionally, with the folks who had interacted with the police department, we asked, have you or anyone in your household experienced any discrimination or bias based on your race, gender, age, religion, sexual orientation, or disability in your interaction or communication with your township police department? We found that 10% of the residents in the township are reporting among those who are interacting or have had interactions with the police department in the last 2 years are reporting experiences of either a bias event or feelings of discrimination. And then we dug a little bit deeper among the 16 people who identified those events. We asked them just sort of in confidence, can you kind of sum up what was it that had happened? What was the event? And we saw a large number of folks responding that they felt like parking tickets were being given out, disproportionately in African American communities versus white parts of the township, and just general feelings of discrimination and racial bias. There were, some comments about accusations of having drugs and false accusations from police department staff to residents. There was also some comments about religious discrimination on religious beliefs. So I think it's important to keep in mind that of these, this 10%, it really represents about 4% of the entire township when we look at the entire population. We then wanted to give a non-biased sort of description about defunding the township police department. Obviously, there's a lot of national politics and other aspects that impact this debate. So the way we worded it, in an attempt to try and plug in and understand the feelings from that sentiment as well as the policies in general, we stated it as follows. Many cities across the country are re-examining the role law enforcement plays in their communities and are considering efforts known as defunding the police, which would reallocate funding to other community services. Please indicate whether you agree or disagree with reducing funding to your township's police department budget. As you can see, 30% agreed with this policy versus 58% who disagreed. And I think it's important to note that the intensity in this question is really on the side of disagreement with the policy. You can see that 12% strongly agree with the policy of defunding as described in the question versus 47% who strongly disagree. When we ask this question and someone responds, we follow up and say, is that strongly or somewhat? And this kind of gives us an intensity score on questions like this. So you can see by essentially a 4-to-1 margin that the intensity is on disagreement. We do see, in places like Ward 2, it's at a minus 49. Among seniors, there's more resistance to this policy, but we do see support among African American residents at 50 to 37. That's a plus 13. And then among Indian residents, there's a higher just level. You can see it on that box on the right. It's the don't know, undecided. They really don't have a strong position relative to the other groups, although they do oppose it. There's about a third of Indian and Asian Indian residents in town who aren't sure about where they stand on that policy. We do see there's greater support for defunding police among single residents and newer residents, as well as those who list social injustice as their top issue and disagree that the police force reflects the community as a whole. We took a look a little bit further at those who are responding yes to the agreement with defunding the police by demographic. And so at the top of the chart, if you can see it on the screen, there's a green line that really identifies the net positive. That is, more people are siding with the defunding policy initiative versus not. And at the top are single women, followed by African American women, African American men, and interestingly, Asian Indian women, as well as college-educated women just below that at 39%. So I think that this kind of reflects, you can see as you go down further, the gray boxes on the right start to show where the disagreement on this policy grows stronger. But certainly at the top of this is, women are driving a lot of this conversation. We also asked just, as part of this national debate, there's often a question about whether the police department reflects the community as a whole that it's serving. We asked that question just as it was stated this way. My local police department is a good reflection of the community in which it serves. We asked for an agree, disagree on that. We had a strong 75 to 15% agree that the police department here in Woodbridge does reflect the community that it serves. That includes 55 to 37 margin among African Americans at plus 18. And then Indian residents notably are sort of showing a higher level of sort of like undecided, don't know. They're positive, but just there's an unknown factor with that. If you look at the people who rank social injustice as their top issue, they're also saying by a 23-point margin, 50 to 27, that the police department does reflect the township as a whole, as well as those who say that they agree with defunding the police department. That's at an even stronger 63 to 29, a plus 34-point margin. Notably among higher income residents, we see the gap drop almost relative to the other income levels on the whole. They're at a plus 20 versus plus 63, plus 69, plus 62 for other income levels in the township. We dug in a little bit deeper too on just the 30% who agree with defunding the police. And I think it's important to note that if there was a overwhelming sense of negativity or sort of resistance to the police department as a whole, that we would see it in these numbers, and we're not. I mentioned before that the top left box is a police are a good reflection of the community questions. That's a 63-29, and remember this is among the 30% who agreed with defunding the police department. They also agree at a 42-34 margin that it's important to hire more police officers. This is driven by the 20% who really don't take a position on that, but it is right side up. They're also reporting good scores as it relates to the police department, communications with the township police. The bottom left box is the 40% of our sample that had interactions with the police department and also agree with defunding the police. And if this was in a bad place, we'd see more red than green here. On the right side, they're also saying by a 60 to 17 margin that things in the township are heading in the right direction. And then just our basic sort of ratings about the police department specifically, it's really equal between those who are giving an excellent and very good score versus those who are giving a fair and poor score. So we're not seeing really overwhelming levels of opposition, negativity towards the police department, which I think is notable. We also asked about interactions with the township staff. So beyond school officials, beyond the police department, just sort of the day-to-day folks in the clerk's office, DPW, et cetera. And similar numbers of residents are reporting 40% interacting with the township at some point in the last 24 months. We're seeing higher levels among white voters, but lower levels among most of other communities of color, so African American, Hispanic, Indian, Asian Indian. And one of the recommendations that we made is, as we saw throughout this survey, is that I think that there's room for improvement, just re-examining the role that the township has had in communicating with some of these communities to ensure that they're aware of some of the services, the events, and so forth that are happening in the township. We also asked among that 40%, just in those dealings with the township staff, again, all positive ratings here at 86, 81, 79%. We followed this up with a similar question about among those who've had interactions with the township, have any of those resulted in some sort of feelings of discrimination or bias? 4% of those interactions are reporting those types of events. 17% just a general sort of feeling of discrimination or racial bias. There's also some mentions of lack of accommodations for those with disabilities. We followed this up with another question about attendance at township events and entertainment events that are put on by the township in the last 2 years. A similar number, 39% are saying that they've attended, but on the bottom right, highlighted in yellow, you can see among some of the like Hispanic and Indian, Asian Indian numbers here, they're much lower than among white and African American residents who seem to be engaging in these events in the township at higher levels. So this kind of feeds into the notion about increasing these communications, whether it's multilingual communications or tailoring content or whatever it is to these communities to build greater interest in them. We also asked, out of order here, I'm sorry. We also asked just, have there been any experiences of discrimination at these events? 3% are reporting that, and the highest, the comments that came back were really related to disability access. We followed this up with a question that said, have you or anyone in your household experienced any discrimination, et cetera, with a resident from your community? 10% of residents are saying that they have experienced those. Again, general feelings at 36% of general feelings of discrimination or racial bias, feeling like they were treated poorly due to skin color, some verbal abuse, rude comments, things of that nature. And then as you get lower down the chart here, there's references to religious beliefs, political beliefs, discrimination based on age. We wanted to get a sense too of those who have a child in the household that's attending public schools. 29% have someone in their home that has attended public schools in the last 24 years. And we followed this up as well. Have you had any interactions that have resulted in some sort of feelings of discrimination or bias? 6% of the residents who are reporting someone in their household as attending public schools are reporting those, and similar comments on the right just about general feelings again about discrimination, racial bias, skin color, verbal abuse, rude comments, etc. We then, to close out the survey, just kind of asked about open-ended questions. What are some of the positive things, the best things about living in Woodbridge versus the worst things about living in town? And really positive scores, as you'd imagine. We tried to cluster these as best as we could into this sentiment that's provided in the chart. This refers to friendly, upbeat neighborhood, nice people, community, centrally located, feeling safe in the township, peaceful, quiet, etc. We have a number of just general comments that are referred to in the chart here that we had pulled out of the verbatims and provided in the report. And then we also asked about what are some of the worst things about living in the township, and not surprisingly, that traffic really takes the cake at 20%, followed by general gripes about taxes and higher taxes and overbuilding, and the list goes down about infrastructure and crowding, etc. Again, here are additional comments that were pulled out of the verbatim reports on the open-ended questions here. And that is a summary of our findings. Again, I'll be available at the end here to answer any questions.
Yeah, we're gonna move on here, and I'm gonna have Gary from my subcommittee, and he has some information he's gonna share with you first.
Good evening, everyone, and I apologize for being tardy. First thing I'd like to do, Mayor McCormick is with us tonight, which is a treat. And he has a 10-minute video that he would like to share with us. I'd like to yield the floor to Mayor McCormick.
Thank you, Mr. White. If we're ready, Matt is here. If you're ready to show the video, it speaks for itself. Hello, I'm Woodbridge Mayor John McCormick. Last year, the state legislature passed and Governor Murphy signed into law Senate Bill number 401 that requires all law enforcement agencies to establish a minority recruitment and selection program using guidelines to be established by the state attorney general. Approximately half of the municipalities in the state of New Jersey operate under civil service guidelines, including Woodbridge Township. For our police department, this means that we can only hire police officers from the official civil service list given to us by the state, which is generated approximately every 3 years after the State Department of Personnel holds a test to rank applicants by score. Persons who want to be police officers in Woodbridge must live in the township at the time of applying to take the civil service test and must maintain residence through their official hiring date, at which time they can move out of Woodbridge Township. The list we received from the state includes only those applicants who indicated Woodbridge as one of their preferences for employment. Veterans who served in a combat zone get what is referred to as Veterans Preference, which ranks qualified candidates by score at the top of the list before civilians, as long as they attain a score of at least 70 on the test. As a result of civil service rules, Woodbridge therefore cannot directly recruit candidates to be police officers in the township, but we can recruit them to take the police officer civil service test and inform them of appropriate details regarding the test. The township's formal recruitment practices are detailed in Chapter 410 of our police department policies and procedures, and they include appropriate affirmative action and equal employment opportunity provisions. The police department visits schools and houses of worship and distributes informational flyers and makes every effort to reach out to as many young people as possible, with a particular focus on identifying minority candidates. The Commission for the Certification of Law Enforcement Agencies reviews all of our policies and procedures, including Chapter 410, every 3 years, and we have always achieved the top level of accreditation. Earlier this year, the state legislature passed and the governor signed an additional law, Senate Bill 3220, that becomes effective August 4th of 2021. This permits civil service police departments to directly hire Police Training Commission certified police officers who have not taken the civil service entry-level examination. This is commonly referred to as the alternate route plan. Under this program, individuals can qualify for and attend a certified police academy and graduate, usually after paying their own way through it. In addition, they usually forego any income for approximately 6 months while in the academy, since they have no employer sponsoring them or promising them employment upon graduation. The law also states that the Civil Service Commission shall establish rules and regulations and an administrative process to implement this law, though that is still being contemplated and no such rules have been issued yet. This new law allows the township to begin the process of diversifying our police force immediately, rather than waiting for the next civil service test, which may take years, and which may not produce a list of candidates that will allow us to establish this diversity. Woodbridge Township currently has 206 sworn police officers. We have a stated goal of getting to 215 during the current fiscal year, 2021, and to 220 in fiscal year 2022. We currently have 7 candidates in the police academy in Cape May, New Jersey, and we are reviewing the current civil service listing in preparation of hiring more police officers. Retirements always hamper our efforts to get our numbers up to exactly where we want them to be. We typically have 6 to 8 retirements per year, so staying even in our count is difficult, let alone increasing it. To get 6 to 8 new police officers in any given year, we have to evaluate and test approximately 50 candidates from the list. Many find other positions or change their mind about a law enforcement career. Many cannot establish Woodbridge residency, and many do not qualify by passing a physical, psychological evaluation, or drug test. Many are not able to graduate successfully from a police academy. Of our 206 current police officers, 8.21% are female, 15.94% are Hispanic, 2.42% are Black, and 3.38% are Asian. Our township population, according to the most recent census data, is 50.27% female, 15.63% Hispanic, 9.85% Black, and 22.42% Asian, with 8.55% classified as other. Clearly, our Woodbridge police force does not reflect the diversity of the township. That needs to change. To implement the new state law, the Township Council must adopt a resolution or ordinance authorizing this alternative route plan. In adopting this law, we will possess a valuable tool that will allow us to achieve the diversity we so desperately seek in the ranks of our police department. We can work with the rules and regulations that are promulgated by the Civil Service Commission and establish our own new policies and procedures that take advantage of this new option that was made available to us. Our township administration and our police department leadership are supportive of this resolution, and we are anxious to begin its implementation. During the last month of deliberations and discussions about the new law and the alternate route program, there has been much misinformation in the public realm about the township's plans. The following paragraphs address these inaccuracies. This new law will not impact the township's commitment to veterans throughout Woodbridge, and it will not affect our hiring of veterans in any way. We made it crystal clear in discussions with police representatives that we will not use the alternative route plan as long as there is an active civil service list with veterans on it. Veterans fought hard for our country, and they fought hard for special consideration under civil service regulations, and we will never take that away from them. Our commitment to our veterans is very important to us as elected and appointed officials. We also stated that we would increase our goal of 220 police officers by 1 for every person we employed under the alternate route program. Some individual is always the next person who would have been hired if your municipality decided to employ 1 additional police officer. And by counting alternate route hires on top of the 220 goal and not within it, nobody will be skipped on the list because we implemented this program. Concerns have been raised about how future township governmental administrations and police department leadership might abuse this new law. First, there are strict anti-nepotism provisions in the law to prevent such activity. Second, we are willing to insert a sunset provision into the resolution, making it effective through December 31st, 2023, the last day of the current administration. Future leadership of the township and the department, which may or may not be different from the current leadership, would therefore have to seek new approvals from the next township council to continue the alternate route program. The township has not had any communication with any individual about possible participation in the alternative route program. Not only is the state law not effective for 5 more months, but the township council has yet to approve the resolution to allow us to implement this program. Finally, the township's lack of diversity on the police force is not the fault of any former or current township or police department administrators. The lack of diversity is due to a flaw in the civil service system that is being properly addressed with the alternative route program. We, as leaders of Woodbridge Township, have always completely supported our police department 100% by increasing staffing levels and by providing all the necessary training and equipment they need. We constantly refer to the Woodbridge Police Department as the best police department in the state of New Jersey, and we mean it. Diversifying our police force can only make it better. Any and all concerns about this new law will be addressed, and additional questions will be answered as we move through a thorough and complete review of the resolution that we will ultimately present to the Township Council. However, distortions of facts and misrepresentations about our intentions will not be tolerated. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Now it's my turn. I'm a walker when I talk, so I'm sorry. This alternate way of hiring is a good thing. It's like hiring an Army officer. There are 4 different ways to become a commissioned officer. Officer candidate school is one way. ROTC is another way. You have the commissioning program as an enlisted man, and there are battlefield commissions. So these alternates, in theory, should be very good and will be able to diversify our fine police department. But the number one thing that we had really had an issue about, and it is now law, A 4271 requires all uniform officers to wear body cameras. Less than half the state's 537 police departments have officers wearing body cams. The bill will make significant investment to get body cameras rolled out. The bill appropriated $58 million, signed into law November 2020. It is effective June 1st. Woodbridge Police Department's body cam rollout. The usage of body cams take effect 7 months after enactment. June 1st, 2021 will be the required date under the statute. Woodbridge Police Department is still waiting on specific directions from the AG's office. Director Hubner is a part of the county working group on body cams. The regulations regulates the use of body-worn cameras. Under the bill, officers will be required to keep the camera activated when responding to a call for service or when initiating a law enforcement or investigative encounter. When immediate activation of the camera is impossible or dangerous, an officer would be required to activate the camera at the first reasonable opportunity to do so. Officers will be required to notify the subjects that the camera is activated and, under certain conditions, may deactivate a camera upon the subject's request. To protect the privacy of civilians in sensitive situations, the bill limits the use of body-worn cameras while officers are on school property, in medical facilities, and in houses of worship. Only uniformed officers are required to wear cameras. This is meant to protect or carve out officers doing undercover work. Again, the AG hasn't given specific direction yet to the department on the rollout. These are all pertinent. These are all things that we had sought information on, getting these measures put into place. Bias training. Bias training for law enforcement enacted effective March 1st, 2021. A 3641 requires the Division of Law and Public Safety to incorporate implicit bias in cultural diversity training materials for law enforcement officers. Makes this mandatory cultural diversity and implicit bias training for law enforcement officers. The major change as a result of this legislation, which was signed into law in August 2020, was a mandate to address implicit bias in training of particular qualities by an officer to a member of some social out group. The added section on implicit bias covers the employment of strategies to eliminate unconscious biases that shape behavior and produce disparate treatment of individuals based on their race, ethnicity, religious belief, gender identity, sexual orientation, socioeconomic status, or other characteristics. It was signed into law on March 1st, 2020. Legislation already existing. This is concerning our issue with domestic violence. S3147 expands the definition of domestic violence to include psychological and economic abuse. S3103 requires seizure of ammunition and certain firearm components in response to domestic violence restraining orders or conviction. S3112 requires obstetrical providers to provide domestic violence screenings and all health care professionals to take certain actions to prevent perpetrators of domestic violence from obtaining copies of a victim's medical record. S3113 expands eligibility under New Jersey Earned Income Tax Credit Program to allow taxpayers who are victims of domestic violence to claim credit with filing status of married filing separately. S3105 requires certain family or household members of victims to be notified when firearms are returned to persons charged with domestic violence or subject to extreme risk protection order. S3111 requires health insurance carriers to categorize mental health treatment and therapy received by victims of domestic violence as medically necessary treatment and provide full benefits coverage therefore. And last, S3120 requires public entities that operate websites or web pages pertaining to domestic violence to utilize certain electronic tools and security measures to protect online visitors who may be victims of domestic violence. Efforts that are still being made, making their way through the Legislative Act to bolster the strong laws already in existence in both to both protect victims of domestic violence and to additionally ensure that perpetrators are brought to justice. Expanding the definition of domestic violence required obstetrical providers to perform domestic violence screenings and all healthcare professionals to take certain actions to prevent perpetrators of domestic violence from obtaining copies of the victim's medical record. Other legislation still working its way through the system requires the Civil Service Commission to conduct an analysis of law enforcement agencies in New Jersey to determine racial composition, salaries, geographic and socioeconomic variances, and the impact of the residency requirement. This legislation will also create a program that provides low-income prep courses for entry-level exams for residents of low-income communities and possible scholarships for alternate route programs that qualify applicants for law enforcement positions. This is what the mayor was just talking about. Requires the Civil Service Commission to establish and maintain a mentoring program for minority civil service law enforcement applicants. The matter is currently in front of the state Supreme Court, and police unions are broadly in opposition to these directives. So keep that in mind. There's always, every good move, there's always another move who says, no, we don't like it.
Gary, will you read that again? What are they?
New directives were issued by the Attorney General on internal affairs, policy, and procedures. The directives require all police agencies in the state to publish a synopsis of all complaints in which an officer was terminated, demoted, or suspended for more than 5 days. Further, they require the name of the officer and a summary of the misconduct. That matter is currently in front of the state Supreme Court, and police unions are broadly in opposition to this directive.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, we've made a lot of good things happen in a short amount of time. There's a lot of more good things that need to happen. There are bad things happening every day. We will never be finished. This whole thing will never be complete. There will always be efforts made to make things better. This is what we're going to continue to do. With your help and your blessing, and with the help of the mayor and the rest of the administration, we're going to try to do what we can to make it better for everybody concerned. That's all I have. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Gary. That's a lot of data that we've been blessed to be a part of and to hear here today. Right now, I'm going to move on to just a quick note on the new business and give you a quick update. May 10th, on our next meeting, we will be having that with Dr. Nolan, and we will be talking about the mental health issue. Okay, so just want to prepare you for that. At this portion of the program, I'm going to open this up to the public at this point in time, and I want to make a motion for that.
So moved. We have a second?
Second.
Okay. Now, this portion of the meeting is now open. We're going to entertain questions first from the summary that was given through the Mercury survey. So we're going to concentrate strictly on that area only. Okay? I want you to direct all your questions to me, and then from here, I will deem who in fact will answer those questions. So when you come up, just give your name, where your full name, the area of the township you're in, and we will go forward with that now. Okay. Also, the summary and all the information and the data will be on our website tomorrow. So you will have a a breakdown of all this information for you to be able to see. On the on our website, yes. Okay, any questions? Come up to the mic.
Kyle Anderson, Woodbridge Township. Does this have to be in the form of a question, or can you make a general statement about what the overall, or are you only fielding questions?
We're trying to get questions, because I just don't know how many there are going to be, and I'm trying to give everybody an opportunity
Okay.
to say it.
Sure.
Okay?
Don Green, resident of Island. Just in regards to the findings, I'm just trying to understand, data was gathered, just trying to understand, is there an action plan to address, well, first, was there anything that were represented today that you guys have highlighted as problematic that then are going to have action plans formulated in order to address what concerns you may have? And is there any additional forum outside of the survey that may have not captured or represented as accurately as we believe some things might be? I'm not necessarily in alignment with the metrics. That being said, is there going to be any other forums in order for you guys to ascertain different type of feedback other than the survey that you guys have conducted?
Bill or Mayor?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There's a lot of areas I think we'll address from the survey. Some of the communication issues, some of the areas where people felt they were discriminated against because of bias or any other reason. I wish I could get all the surveys back and see who said it and find out exactly why they said it and deal with it, but we can't do that. So we're going to look at all the issues as a whole, and wherever there were, and there's not many, but wherever there were any issues that would be problematic for us, like the bias issues, we will do our best to address them and see what we can do. I don't think we can say what the next step will be until we finish implementing this step.
Okay, let me phrase it a different way. Have you guys determined, based on the data that you received, a list of things that you have perceived to be problematic that you are going to plan on addressing?
I wouldn't say we made a list yet because we're waiting for the presentation and see what the feedback was, but certainly there will be a list.
Okay.
And there's several things I can think of that we definitely want to talk about.
Okay.
But we wanted to present it to this body, and it's going to be out in the public, and then we can gauge other reactions, and that might lead us to different interpretations of the data that we didn't come up with. So we'll let everybody have their input, and then we'll make our decisions.
Okay, I'll stop there. I'll probably be back, but I'll stop.
Okay. Okay. It's going to be an ongoing venture. You know, it's not just going to stop here.
Bob Lauer, Avenel. My first question is just about the key issues that were raised in the community. Property taxes was top, and then there were others that followed. The question is, for Mercury, was this a forced choice, or did the people identify these as key issues on their own? You may have said it, but I couldn't keep up with everything.
All right, Bill?
You know, that's a great question. In the interest of trying to quantify what we felt were sort of the top issues, we provided a list of, I believe it was 8 or 9 different topics that tend to come up as key issues: schools, property taxes. We included social injustice as one of the key issues, and then at the end, if we didn't capture something that someone felt was the most important issue, we provided an open-ended feedback to be able to capture that. I feel like we had maybe about 2% of respondents who gave some other issue other than what was in the original list, but that's how the question was structured.
Okay, thank you. The second question has to do with one of the questions for Mercury was, or the issues identified was, the question was posed surrounding continuing to increase the size of the police force. And I just wondered what the thinking was in terms of asking the question with the presumption that the police force should be increased rather than what people think about how satisfied they are with the size of the police force.
So,
Yeah. Mayor?
I think because our stated plan for the last several years, as noted in a lot of our communications, especially the State of the Township address, we have been pretty vocal in the fact that we wanted to increase our police force, and we said 215 this fiscal year and 220 next fiscal year. And of course, with the various issues that have come up in the last 12 months, including defunding police, which is generally at odds with hiring more police officers because it's hard to defund and still increase the size of your force. So we wanted to see what people thought about that issue, specifically about hiring more. That's just the way we worded it.
Okay. I was just reacting to Mercury's comment about not having biased questions, and the presumption that that should happen is a bias to begin with. And in fact, 54% of people said they did not agree with that. If you look at the people who said no or didn't care either way, it was 54 to 42. So the majority of people are not on board with that from the public, according to what I saw on the screen.
Well, then you'd have to do the same thing with all the questions and take away or add the people that don't. You could put them on either side. If they don't care, they don't care. So you can't just say they would have been no's, and you can't just say they would have been yeses. You really should take the percentage of the people that responded yes to the total response and no to the total response, and disregard the people who had no opinion, and then you'll get a better picture of what the real response was by ignoring the people that didn't want to answer the question.
Well, they did answer the question, just wasn't important to them. Some of
Right, but that's a non-answer.
Okay. Well, okay, but 54-42 is not, it's not a huge difference if you want to play it that way. I'll move on with my last question is to Mercury. I presume you have a pretty robust database. Are there benchmarks that you might be able to compare the Woodbridge results with other cities of comparable size and demographic composition that would give us some sense of where we stand since we don't have a baseline to go from in the first case?
Yeah, that'd be for Bill. Bill, you can answer.
Yeah, so we didn't have that as part of the project here. That's probably information that's readily available. I don't know to what extent other communities are kind of modeling the same kind of approach to understanding the community at large through quantitative data. But that's something that, is certainly out of the public domain. It's accessible, it's made public.
Amber Jarrett. I just have a quick question about the questions themselves, I guess, kind of building on what Bob was saying. Who actually designed and chose the wording for the questions? Because even the question about defunding police, just the term defunding in general has gotten a negative connotation, whereas if you take that out and just say reallocating, which you did have in there as well, but there is some bias with that word. And just in general, who chose the specific phrasing for the questions? Was that Mercury, or was that a township thing? Combination?
Yeah,
Bill.
So we worked with the township to develop it. Obviously, we have a background in structuring surveys like this. Going back to the other question about defining, do you support continuing to hire more police officers? it actually comes out at the policy initiative a few different ways. And so, I guess people can disagree about the specific words choices that were made. I think, the context of defunding the police in some ways can be a loaded term that polarizes people one way or the other. And so we want to get that data, right, to understand what that polarization is, but then separately ask it in a remove the language, defund the police, and see how that changes behavior. And you actually see at a higher margin, it's at 62 to 16, using a different point of reference here in the data to suggest that they're pulling out terms like that and just focusing on a policy per se, it still has levels of support.
And just another question about the survey in general. Is this something that would be repeated in the future? I mean, I know we were told at the last meeting that 400 respondents in a town of 100,000 was a significant, statistically significant sample. But I just feel like statistics, you repeat things, you get larger samples. I don't know. I'm just asking if that's something that's being considered to ensure that this is actually an accurate reflection of what the community
Go
feels.
on, Mayor. Go ahead.
We have not considered that yet. It's something we could look into.
Okay.
I think we have to let this play out and
So
see what the overall reactions are for the next several months if we see the need to do another one. But right now, I don't see that need, but things could change.
Thank you.
So, Bob was kind of going in line with my original thought that I didn't articulate when I was here in regards to not having an established baseline. So it's going to be kind of a loaded question. Given all that you guys have crunched by way of the number and the data, what's your findings about way of Woodbridge, and how do we stack up relative to what you were expecting? Or were there no expectations?
Mayor? Mayor?
I don't know of any comparable survey by a municipality anywhere that asks the questions that we asked that we could compare ourselves to, but this will be public tomorrow. Perhaps we will learn of other ones. Mercury didn't do anything in all their vast array of clients all over the country. They didn't do anything specific like this. We opened everything up. We asked all these questions, gave all the options, put it all out there. And I would venture to say a lot of towns don't do that and really want to see what people say the way we did. So I'm really not aware of anybody that we can compare ourselves to, but I'd love to see if we could. Bill did say how we compared nationally and statewide on the overall question, but there really isn't anything that anybody's done to say, do you support the things we ask people if they support that I know of?
All right, so asked another way, please satisfied or dissatisfied with the results that we've had?
I'm not getting that question.
Well, we accept the results. They are what they are. Overall, I would say we'd have to say we're satisfied with it, but to the extent that anybody feels discrimination for any reason, we're not satisfied. And we have to try to do what we can to get that number down to zero. Some people express things that are outside of our control. Some people express things like disability access that are within our control. So some people express dissatisfaction with the communications. It's largely the minority population. One thing we did last week or 2 weeks ago is send out a flyer to the Asian Indian community about vaccines, and people can get help getting vaccines. And we did it in English, we did it in Hindi, and we did it in Gujarati. So I think those are the kind of things, and maybe some things have to be Spanish. Those are the kind of things that we can control, and we accept that is a fair criticism because we do everything in English, and maybe we shouldn't. So this is eye-opening for us, so I'm not satisfied if anyone's dissatisfied, and we'll keep doing all we can to look into those issues.
Okay, so thank you. This might be bleeding over to the next subject matter, but I'm going to reference a slide that I thought I saw, and I want to know, how do you square our current police force being represented by way of the community? And I think statistics showed that you guys, that even in the African American community, that over 70% of the folks thought everything looked just like the community. Where I think we could all just say, from an optics perspective, we know that's not true. So how do you guys square the metrics that come back relative to what is our reality?
Well, the question was asked, do you believe the police force reflects your community.
Yeah.
And in terms of, I think, everybody who had to be a member of the community had to live here when they were taking the test, had to live here when they were hired. The vast majority went to school here. People know who the police officers are. I think they answered it from that regard. I think if we asked, do you think the police force represents the community in terms of diversity? I think the answer would have been far greater and far more negative. But it was asked in a general way without that extra phrase regarding diversity. So I think people do think the police force is a good force, and they know them, and they're from our town. But if we said diversity, I'm sure the answer would have been no, more negative.
So I'm trying to understand what was the spirit of the question then. Because if it was just if the police force, how do you guys feel about the police force? I think overwhelmingly, the answer is probably true. But when you say how do you feel it being representative of your community? To me, that speaks directly to diversity, even though diversity wasn't used. So what was the spirit of the question when it was asked?
Can I interject here for a moment? This very same question and issue, my colleague here and I debated calmly, we hope, over the very
Somewhat.
same issue. And Carrie, we asked you a question as well. So we were debating this particular issue. So, you know, we're all in line here that maybe it's not the most perfect survey, but certainly it pointed out things such as communication, as the mayor was pointing out, has to be better. Diversity, you just heard or saw a video where he talked about implementing a plan to do that.
I'm
These
gonna
are
get to
things
that
that are going to
quickly
be
as well. But what I
be
was just
addressed.
again.
So what
the debate. What did you guys debate, and what was the underpinning of the debate?
What was the underpinning of the debate?
Yeah.
Gary was saying it's through the eyes of the person, correct me if I'm wrong, and I was saying I can't believe the results, because the fact that when I look at, is it a reflection of a community, and I look at the breakdown, and you saw the statistics that the mayor gave of our police department, to me it meant that it wasn't a reflection of the diversity of our community. On the other hand, and Gary, I'll let you speak for yourself, he was saying, Pat, you're reading it wrong, that it's through the lens or the eyes of the person answering the question. And I don't know if I quoted you correctly.
Specifically, what we were talking about in the debate was on that very question. The Indian community is underrepresented on the police department. However, there was a very large percentage of positive responses to that question from the Indian community.
That's my point.
Now, where I was coming from and what I brought into play was cultural mores. Okay? Your average, everyday Indian of the higher castes don't want to be cops. That's not their job. That's not what they're here for. All they're looking for is a safe community. So if they don't care if he's greening from Mars, if you take care of our community, we're satisfied, and that reflects us, safety.
Yeah. But
Other communities.
I'm going to respectfully disagree. I'm going to move on. I wanted to kind of understand what was the intent of the question, because if it wasn't about diversity, then what was the spirit of the question? And then I'll have one other question and I'll be done. Like the question was asked to solicit some response based on something. So what were you guys after when the question was formulated? If it wasn't diversity, then I want to understand what it was. Because to me, when I read it as diversity.
Yeah,
So,
I think that actually goes back to the point that just viewing it for the respondent, it's
not talking about the view. I'm talking about the reason why the question was drafted. So I know our folks could have interpreted it. I got that. What I'm saying is, as Mercury that led with the question, what were you soliciting with the question?
I think the solicitation was toward the diversity issue, but we did not mention that, and maybe we should have.
Okay.
But I think
So then that goes back to my original question: is how do you square the result with the question when it's obvious that they're diametrically opposed? You kind of give us one?
I do, and some of the questions are not consistent in there with people who say one thing on one issue and seem to be contradicting on the other issue. So as Gary said, I think it's how people read the question, and I don't think people read this question as being about diversity. Do you think the police force reflects your community? That doesn't necessarily say, do you think it's a diverse police force? I would have read it that way, and I think we kind of wrote it that way to get that answer, but I don't think we got that answer.
And Mr. Green, the way you shut me down was implicit bias. No, you didn't let me finish because we'll talk offline.
No, let me explain to you. Your debate was less germane to me understanding what the spirit of the question was.
It was germane to it if you'd have let me finish, so we'll talk offline on that. All right?
Hi, Denise Anderson, Woodbridge, New Jersey. I have a couple of questions. The release of the survey and the results will be tomorrow.
Yes.
And so for most of us who weren't participants of the survey, and for those who could not very well see the results on the monitors, I'm sure when we have the opportunity to sit down and look at the results and review the questions, we would probably come back with more questions, and unfortunately, Mercury probably won't be here during that time. But my question is, do you plan to have another meeting to review the, just for the public to come back and make comments?
Yes, it will be posted tomorrow. Any questions that you have, number one, you don't even have to wait till then. You can email us, okay? And we can get back to you with some of that information, and or at our next meeting, you could come forward and we will try to get as many questions answered, for you as possible.
Okay. Another question that I had, some of them have been asked already, but one thing that I was curious about, I believe the HRC did review the results of the survey. Is that accurate? Did you review the results of the survey?
Yes, we're
Okay.
still going over it.
Okay,
It's ongoing.
Okay, so as the HRC, was there anything that was revealed in the results that surprised you?
Some things I was kind of aware of, prior to it taking place, but, you're looking for data, and to get that information back to you. We're still going through it because it's a lot, and that's why we're going to need until that next meeting, to also look at what we can do to improve the areas that need to be worked on. And we'll be working with the mayor as well to address those issues.
And I know the mayor's a numbers guy. So based on the numbers, Mayor, do you have, was there anything for you that surprised you?
Yeah, I think the one that surprised me the most, well, there's a few things, but the senior services, which I think are the best around, didn't get good scores because the people in the 18 to 34 and the 35 to 44 group don't know what we do for seniors. So when you look at the total number, you say, wow, this town doesn't like what we give for seniors. But when you look at the senior numbers on the senior question, it's out of the ballpark. I was surprised by the minority communities feeling a lack of transparency in government. I still don't really know what that means. I do understand that they are dissatisfied with communications, and again, because I think we don't attempt to reach them in the mode that they need to be reached in, because many people that are Hispanic don't speak English. Many people that are Asian Indian speak Hindi or Gujarati and don't speak English. So we know now, and Mr. Haggerty and I have talked about this since the survey came out, we have to do a better job with that. But overall, I think the numbers are positive. If only 4%, listen, let me say this the right way. 4% is a low number for people who feel discriminated against, but it's too high a number because it's greater than zero. So we need to figure that out. What are we doing, and look at the detailed answers and find out what are we doing that we can do better. Disability access is easy. I wish I knew where. I wish I knew, was it a concert? Was it a play? Was it a parade? I wish I knew the answer. Somebody who felt discriminated against in dealing with the police. I wish I knew who, when, where, or why, and how, and I could deal with it. So we will look at every place where we didn't score as high as we would have liked, and we will attempt to address those issues.
And say for the number that might have had a high percentage of favorable responses, and if there is a smaller amount, would you still be interested in pursuing that small demographic to find out what their story is or what their narrative?
Yeah, I wish I could see the surveys and see the names and numbers, and I would call everybody who said something that I didn't think was acceptable to us, but we can't. So yeah, any, as I said before, I'm not satisfied if anybody's dissatisfied. We want to do everything we can for everybody, and if they don't think we're doing the right job, I'd like to know why and see if we can fix it.
Okay, all right, thank you.
No.
Chairman, may I say something?
Yes.
In response to, there are several thoughts that I have, but one of them I think that, and we haven't had a chance to give feedback to the administration or the mayor, so I haven't talked to him about this yet, but one of the things that I think is interesting is in the African-American community and in Ward 3, which is Avenel, Port Reading, has a high concentration of African-Americans, and among those 18 to 40, social injustice in the community ranks really, really high as being very, very important. So I think as an administration to pay attention to the next generation and a passion for social justice, as well as the African-American community, to dig down on that a little bit, to go, what does that mean to you? What are your concerns? So that would be one of the thoughts that I had.
Jimmy Frage from Avenel, New Jersey. You kind of touched on, Ms. Lowry, the area that I want to address. First off, when they did the poll, per se, how do they determine exactly where and who they're asking?
Bill? Or Dan? Yeah, Bill.
I can go back to, it's hard to see here, but really what we do is we start with a consumer file, a number of different data points to between cell phones, landline phones. We proactively, through a professional call center, reach out to them, screen out anyone who isn't a Woodbridge resident, and then model the survey based on the population breaks in the township as listed on the chart there on the right. So you can kind of see what our estimates were on the population, because they do change since the last census, and there's updates and so forth. But we tried to align as close as we could to that estimated population. That way, everything is proportional to the township as a whole, between gender breaks, geographic breaks, age breaks, et cetera.
Because I do understand that the broad scope of what you're trying to do is to find out discrimination. The height of all that took place was because of the injustices that were being seen in society with the minorities within the communities. So why didn't the approach be done as targeting polling? What that means is, if you have 4 children and there's one that's being mistreated, wouldn't you talk to that one child? Because the other 3 really don't fully understand what discrimination is going on. So I understand the poll as a whole, but if you really look at target polling, focusing on what issues are at hand might be beneficial to really get a good, basically what it comes down to, a lot of people that see this will look at it and say, is it a true representation of what's going on? And to make it a true representation, you have to speak to the person or the group. In this case where the Asian Americans were being attacked, it's all over the news. If you want to find out how much discrimination is in the Asian community, you have to speak to Asian people. So that's where I just want to leave that out there to say, did you guys consider that at all?
Well, one thing I would just add, just on, for anybody who had indicated that they had been, victim of any sort of discrimination, et cetera, that we did have follow-up questions But it's done in confidence. So in the front of the survey, we let them know that the results aren't going to be shared. It's confidential, and then we remind them about that. When we sought feedback about what specifically happened, what was it, and we have a collection of verbatim responses on those. But it is not part of the record per se to say these are the 16 people that said that they had issues. I would defer to the township on how to solicit that input in a way, from individuals, I guess, in the township in order to collect that feedback. We're limited in some ways in how we can collect that and sort of showcase here, which we've tried to do our best in the presentation.
No, thank you for that. And like the young lady said, it's a concern for certain areas in the township with just a small sample. Would the next step be to dig deeper, to find out more, to see if you possibly could find a pattern of things that could be going on that maybe is not reflected on what you already have?
It's possible, Mr. Frage, but we haven't made any firm plans yet. But you bring up a good point. We have not talked about the next round yet. We want to get through this round and devour all the data and deal with it the best way we can. It may lead to more polling. It may lead to more interviews. It may lead to what you're suggesting, but we just don't know yet.
And I'd like to say something before the next question. Be advised, this is merely a starting off point. This isn't the end. We got to have a baseline in order for us to go and find out what the real root of a particular issue is. We have to find out where the discrimination lies. Some people will talk over a phone, some people won't. Some people will talk to someone that are just like them. Some people won't. Vice versa. This is a starting off. This is the first chapter. This is the prologue. The preview. That's all this is. This gives us something to go on for the next chapter and the next chapter after that. And since we're talking about diversity, it is one of those things that must be taken in consideration. Everybody else's social mores. Everybody doesn't experience the same things everybody else does. A black person doesn't know what it feels like to be white, and a white person definitely doesn't know what it feels like to be black. We don't know what it feels like to be Hindi or Muslim or any other different thing, but you have to ask and find out. This is this first question. After this, then we can start delving into the depths of what makes us different and what makes us the same. So that's what this is all about.
It wasn't really a question, I guess. It was just more of a statement, because I feel like that 4% kind of seems misleading, because Jimmy's right. If you take out the over 50% of people that are white, odds are they haven't been discriminated against, so those are all going to be no. So then it becomes more like 10% of actual minorities, where it's just 4%. You know what I'm saying? So it's a little misleading to say only 4% or whatever, because you've got over half of the respondents are not likely to ever be in that situation in the first place, and you've only sampled less than 1% of the township. And I know I keep bringing that up, but I just feel like I'm not sure how that's a statistically significant sample size to actually guide policy and future decisions. I feel like it would have to be repeated. It would have to have a larger sample size. You would have to have follow-up questions. If you don't know what they meant by lack of transparency, well, how are you going to find out? If you don't know, I didn't notice any questions about nepotism in there, and I feel like that's definitely an issue in Woodbridge. You know what I mean? So there are other things that maybe weren't even put into the survey, maybe intentionally or unintentionally. So I don't know. I guess it's more of an observation. I don't know. I just question the significance of one standalone, less than 1% survey possibly guiding anything without further research. I mean, from the researcher, I've done plenty of research, and it just seems not sound.
Yeah, my comment would be that, often the analogy we use is sort of like if you have a big pot of soup and you take a ladle, are you only taking a small section of the soup? Does it taste the same? If you stir it up and you pull out the ladle, you're getting a sample even though you don't have the whole pot of soup. I guess that's one way to kind of look at it. I think if we had gone out on Main Street and asked 400 people and put it in a document and said, this is what we found, well, that would be limited into people who are walking down the street, live in this area. It may be, heavily weighted against, for one particular, ethnicity or age group or whatever it is. We did, basically, as you can see from the spread here, just really did our best to align the findings with the population as a whole. And yes, you could say, and the data suggests in certain places where there are certain demographic subgroups that agree that maybe they don't rate things as high, and that data is in here, and you can find it when you pull it up. But the 400 sample is pretty standard, and one of the statistical pieces of this is like if we had done this same survey 100 times, 95 out of 100 times, we would have been exactly within the same margin of error. And if we had increased our sample size from 400 up to about 750, it only drops our margin of error by about 1%. So, some of this also has to do with sort of like how much do you pack into a survey? Sure, we would want to ask 100 questions, but there's also this give and take about how long will people stay on and answer and get to the meat of the real things that you want to know. And so sure, there's probably 100 other questions that we could put in here, but you start to get folks falling off, and then this sample gets a little distorted. And so we kind of have an industry best practice here to try and keep it about, I think we had around 45 to 50 questions in here, which included the demographics that allowed us to separate out and build it in a model that's reflective of the community.
And just to interject, like Gary said too, this is only chapter 1, okay? We're gonna put a whole book together, trust me, okay? Go ahead, thank you.
Good evening, Reverend Donna Stewart, representing the Perth Amboy Area Branch of the NAACP, which covers Woodbridge Township. I want to thank you for what we've seen. There is a lot to digest, so I will go back and look at all of the slides because I do have a lot of questions just based on what I saw and heard, but there's much to look into. My question is, one of my questions is, Chair, but I'm sure the mayor will answer, is what in 2021 was the epiphany that the police department is not represents the community in which it serves? Why April 2021 do we see the need, which most of us who are here saw the need for diversity into the police department before now?
Mayor?
Well, the state just passed a law not long ago, so we're reacting to the law the state passed, and we're expressing our support for it. That just happened.
But only because the law stated, not because you saw a need?
Well, no, the survey we started planning last fall, probably in October, we started meeting to talk about the questions and how we'd go about it, and who we would hire, and how we would implement it. It hit the streets, I think Bill said February 8th till 11th, but we started working on this back in the fall of 2020. And of course, with the virus, everything was upended, but we still got it out in early February, and now we're talking in early April about the results.
I just, being a lifelong resident of Perth Amboy, but had a lot of dealings with Woodbridge, and I've stated it at one of these meetings as well as many of the city council meetings that I come into, and I know that the survey was given to the residents of Woodbridge or the voters of Woodbridge, but outside of this township, we got into a real heated discussion last fall or two about how Woodbridge treats people, and Black people are very nervous about coming into Woodbridge Township, even driving. You almost put your car into stop and reverse just because you don't want to be profiled. And whatever you all believe, it's based on experiences. I know I have a black son who's 23. And when we go to ShopRite, I literally say to him, slow down, don't forget we're in Woodbridge. Slow down, don't forget we're in Woodbridge. Slow down, don't forget we're in Woodbridge. These are not things that I should have to teach my son, because I'm sure many of you don't have to teach that to your children. And then my question is, moving forward, as this being a baseline and some groundwork, consider talking to the people who were elected to serve the people that are being talked about. So again, I'm the president of the Perth Amboy Area Branch of the NAACP, which covers Woodbridge Township and has for 80 years. No one's talked to me, and I represent those people who voted for me. I didn't solicit their vote. I didn't call in any favors. They chose me. People who represent the Indian community, and black people can be Muslim, so we do know what it feels like to be Muslim. Even though I am a Christian, we know what it feels like. So, and then one of the questions, I think someone said that Spanish people don't speak English, some Indians or whatever. Also, the wording has to be, you have to be mindful of your wording, because when people say, do you speak English, that's offensive. The question should be, what language do you speak? Just because I look like I don't speak your language, whatever your American language might be, doesn't mean that I don't speak it. So we have to be mindful in the questions that we ask. What language do you speak? Not, do you speak English? And just because I look a particular way, wear my hair a certain color way, particular garb that I may wear, whatever, you're judging me based on my appearance. So our language has to change. I think also, again, being people who represent the Indian community, people who represent the Latinx community, people that represent the LGBT community, because I don't recall seeing that in the slides, but again, I'll go back and look at it. But we have to remember to look at those people who lead those communities and have conversations with them and invite them to the table in the conversations. I'm new to coming to these meetings for this committee, but I don't know how you all got chosen, how you volunteered or whatever. One day I'd like to have a conversation with each of you individually to find out how you got to serve on this community, this commission, and what do you think about why you are serving, and do you actually go out and talk to people who we're supposed to be serving, because we are to be servant leaders regardless of the position that we've been appointed to, elected to, or chose to fill.
I would love to have that conversation with you.
Absolutely.
Okay?
Reverend Stewart, you have my number. You've never called. That's not true, no, you have not. No, you have not. So don't even go there. No, yeah, we'll talk offline.
So we moved on to the next subject, but I just want to kind of tie up one part, and then we'll move to the police department. So from a timing perspective, because I understand we're at the genesis, the good work by Mercury is done, gives us a baseline to continue on. Mm-hmm. So the spirit of my previous question was, have you identified any things that are quick hits, low-hanging fruit that we can go after? I think the answer to that is no. So what I'd like to understand is the timeline that you guys might have in mind in regards to determining what those list of items are that are coming out as a derivative of this good work, understanding what those 10, 12, 15, 30, whatever they turn out to be, when will that be published? And then when will we have the dialogue around what are we going to do about those 10, 30 things that come out? So if it's not known, that's fine, but we should be thinking in line of what's the timing, because we could be here 10 years from now still going through this data.
Right, no, that's not going to happen. But you're basically speaking in the way of what we're thinking and how we're going to go about it. Right. You know, we're on the same page.
All right. Okay, well, I'm not sure.
Well, so, when it comes to no.
Okay,
I'm talking in reference to.
So are we talking within a month we're going to have a crystallized list of things?
I'm not going to say that. I'm not going to say that.
Okay.
Okay.
So then I'm asking. So what I'm asking is
for the next meeting. Okay. Any other questions you have pertinent to the information that will be put up on the website tomorrow? Be able to come back to us, and you don't even have to wait till then. Okay. You can email us.
Right. So what I'm
as
after
well,
is,
and I will try to get that information back to you as quick as possible.
So what I'm after is not just Don Green; it's just the interest of the public, right?
Right. That's for everybody.
So what I'm trying to ascertain, and maybe I'm not saying it right, is, from you guys' perspective, what timeline are you marching to in regards to distilling the data and then getting action plans placed around those things that get distilled? Is that a 6-month proposition? Is that a year thing that we're going to do? And then to put a bow around it, from the very first city council meeting and the very first Human Rights Commission meeting I've come to, I've made this appeal in both forums, and I think you guys hear it, understand it, but it seems to go nowhere, that in order to have the proper discourse, it's got to take place outside of environments like this, because the exchange never happens, particularly city council meeting. People say what they say, people move on, and then they come back next month and they say the same thing. That they said
There's a lot that goes
right.
on once we leave here,
Right.
and we've gotten together in the different subcommittees, and we've had many meetings, and we've gone and looked at, some of the detail, and it's ongoing.
Spot on. So what I'm trying to suggest is, as you guys are contemplating that as a Human Rights Committee, are you open to other ears and eyes and thoughts in another forum so that exchange could be more timely and more robust?
Mr. Green, you live behind me, man, or I live behind you.
Right.
You have not rang my doorbell. Okay?
So,
we've talked about this, and we could have dialogue, because obviously I like to talk.
Right.
Reverend Donald, you can call me too. All right, but you're a busy woman, so that kind of challenge is good in an open forum. Come talk to me.
It's not a challenge, and she already said it, so I'm not going to repeat it. There's 4 wires on the phone. There's send and receive, and if no one's sending, no one's receiving. So, fair point. I haven't contacted you.
Okay.
Fair
Come
point.
on
You
with
haven't
it, man.
contacted me either. Okay.
And I will make sure you have my number before we leave here.
So again, I'm probably not going to get to where I'm after, which is kind of a timeline that you guys are on. We can talk about that later. I'm going to jump right to the other issue as it pertains to the diversity. So, Mayor, I really applaud you supporting the legislation that's coming from the state, because I believe it's going to enable to get where some of us believe we need to be from a diversity standpoint. I guess the question I would ask you guys is probably going to be directed to the mayor, is given your support, given your understanding of where we are from a demographics perspective and the need or the desire to improve that, what are the barriers to get us quickly to where we need to get to? Because what I thought I heard, and maybe I heard it incorrectly, you're supportive, the police department's leadership is supportive, so it has to be passed by the city council.
That's for the mayor. You got it.
Yes, that's correct. But
Do you envision any resistance coming from the city council? And the reason why I'm asking is we want to get out ahead of that, probably, for those that may be resisting, that's not saying things eye to eye the way you and I might be saying things eye to eye. We might want to get in front of those folks and kind of quell that resistance, because I think it's the right thing to do for the community.
Well, I'll let people who are on that side of the aisle answer for themselves as to whether they're resisting or not, but we don't yet have all of the facts we need from the Attorney General's Office or the Civil Service Commission. They said they will promulgate rules and regulations and concepts and policies and procedures and all those buzzwords, but they haven't yet. Right. So until they do, I don't want to present and ask for a vote on a resolution that's incomplete, that might have to change. So it's no secret that our administration, myself, the police department, we are all supportive of the passage of that resolution. It does need Township Council approval, but we haven't brought it up. It's been in the domain. We've talked about it. It's not yet final, and when it is, perhaps they will bring it up for a vote.
Awesome. So part 2 of the question, then I'll get out the way. As you've desired a target number of officers that you're aspiring to have in the next year or 2, do you have a number in mind in regards to particular demographics of what you would consider to be ideal of a police department? What I'm going at is, if 2% is on the force today is African American, and we represent 10% of the population, is it your desire to kind of have a balanced view, or do you have a target number, not just for African Americans, but across any demographic? Because if you don't have a target, then we don't know what we're shooting for.
I don't have a specific target because we're so far away, in both Asian Indian and African American black police officers are so far away from the numbers that to say we'd want to get there to 10% and 22% would take years probably. So I want to get started, and I want to start identifying candidates as fast as we can and still doing it right and getting the right candidates that will pass the academy and have all the qualifications and pass our interview process. Even though somebody passed the academy, we still got to go through our process of investigating everything, and there's a whole lot of work to do. So I can't put a number on it because in 6 months we might get nobody. In 12 months we might get 5 people.
I guess where I'm going is you probably start with the end in mind, right? So you have already identified a number of officers you'd like to have, knowing that logistically you might not be able to get there because of retirements and everything else, but you still have a number that you'd like to have. So you've got to start it with the end in mind as pertains to the overall police force. I guess I would just suggest give some consideration starting with the end in mind of what that should look like or what we want it to look like, and then we work towards it. Just a thought.
I understand.
Tori Birch. The two, Denise mentioned it, that we'll have access to all the data. Will we also have access to, like, the questions that were asked? Like, does that come within the data? Okay.
Yes.
Yes.
Yep. So we'll
Yes.
see, like, the exact wording of the questions and how
Yes.
many. And, okay.
It's all there for you.
Okay, great. Were there, I think there were. I was gonna ask if there were, like butterfly options, like if you answered one way, it would go further down different loops, different, questioning avenues? There were, right?
Bill?
My recollection, and forgive me, but I think it was really only if there was a reference to a bias or discrimination event where we then followed up with specific questions.
Okay.
Similarly, if someone had given a fair or poor rating for some of the list of core services that we had from the township, we followed up, well, what was it that pushed you to say fair or poor, things like that.
Okay, and then if after they were completed, was there any way for the participants to reach out, like to give further input or further clarification, or when the survey was done, it was done?
Yeah, when it was done, it was done.
Okay, and you did not include incomplete surveys, right? So if there was anybody that may have not experienced discrimination or did experience discrimination but didn't answer about their income, you didn't include it.
Exactly. I mean, so anyone who didn't complete the entire survey, that was disregarded, and we did not.
But you still had the 400 total responses.
Correct.
Right.
There were, in some cases, there are, for example, I think there was reference to, sexual orientation. We did ask a question about that. As you can imagine, there are, I think, about 10% just refuse to answer the question. So in some cases, we do catalog that response if they say, I'm not saying, or refuse to answer. That data is in there, but we obviously can't capture it exactly. So, if they're not forthcoming with the information.
Right, okay. And that question wording, I'm just going to touch on it once. I think it was, I'm just throwing this in for fun, this interpretation. I think it's like, the way that I would have read that question is, I may not be of a certain race, but it is the majority of where I live. Therefore, does the majority of the police force have it? So if I was not white, but I live in an area that is mostly white, is the police force mostly white? That's how I would have thought about that question. Like, two different ways to word it are, does it reflect your community, or do I see myself represented in the police force? Those two interpretations of that one police question. Anyway. Okay, are we going on to are you going to talk about the survey or the? Okay, police.
Survey.
Is everyone done with the survey?
Are we done? Okay. Yeah, because we're going to need to move on to Gary's subcommittee to get those, any questions that people may have.
Good evening, James Dabrowski, Woodbridge proper. I think my first question was touched on. So 266 phone calls, 134 texts out of 100,000 residents roughly. So that's 2/5 of 1% of the town. Just a quick show of hands, how many feel that's an adequate representation of the township? I think one person feels that's an adequate representation of the township.
Well, we're asking the no, I'm talking about a question for,
Well, yeah, I guess for the room, because we only surveyed
No, no.
2/5 of the whole town. We could 2/5 of 1% of the town. I think we
I
could
know,
Mr.
but
Chairman,
we're not-
survey
we're-
people who
we're-
actually care about this stuff.
I hear you.
You know,
Well, we're not gonna go there.
okay.
Mr.
okay.
I
Chairman, there
need you
were
to answer
14
the
I
question.
had to try because
There were 14,979 people were requested to participate in the survey to get to 400. That's 1/6 of our just under 1/6 of our population. Okay.
But how many participated? 400. 400. So, okay, let's just get that straight.
All right.
And it's important, I think, did we even take into consideration that 41.5% of Woodbridge voters voted for a man who banned diversity, equity, inclusion training? Who think discrimination is a myth? Did we take that into consideration? I think it's a valid question.
Okay, if we're talking about,
Stick to the topic.
It's part of the topic.
That is not
It's not?
part of the survey, sir. Stick to the topic.
I think that's a valid question.
I don't think that's a valid question. Continue with another question that sticks to the topic, please.
Okay, let's see. My next question. The mayor credited the Woodbridge Youth for Liberation and Equity with this whole push for social justice. Why were they not included or consulted in this process at all whatsoever? Why were the Woodbridge Youth for Liberation and Equity not included in this process? Can we get an answer, please, Mayor McCormick? What's that? No, but why were they not included in this whole process with the development of a survey? What questions would be on? Why were they not asked this whole resolution to diversify the police? Why were they not asked? They had 11 clear demands. Why were none of them touched on? Why are we doing something totally different that this totally disregards their original input that supposedly started this whole thing?
This whole committee is in response of that.
So why are they not
Well, that-
included?
They were here. They were here in spirit because we had to start somewhere because of this. Okay? Now, we've talked more than once. The thing is, we have to start somewhere. This is where we
Why
started.
not bring them in the process?
They are in the process. This is the result of them.
I've been texting one of the members the whole night. And
wait,
they're
I
not very
don't care
happy
what
with
you
this.
texted. That means nothing to us.
Does it?
We have a process to follow. There is always a process. This is the starting off point.
Okay.
This is not an end all. We're finished. There's nothing else to do. We'll just go on and everything will be fine. No, it's not. This is where we start.
Okay.
And the questions that you're asking are not going to be answered tonight. They're going to be answered as we go forth. Now, as far as whoever you were texting, I don't care because obviously they're not here.
They're at school.
They're at school. I talked to him the other day. So
I didn't say anything.
don't. So the thing is, the process, they are involved in the process.
And they support this?
Who supports what?
This
What is
What
wrong
is-
with what
the
we're
question is, do you
doing?
honestly think
What is wrong with what
well,
we're doing?
Okay,
Now I ask
do you honestly think focusing on compositional diversity is going to solve the huge toxic police culture problem we clearly have? We have 2 civil rights lawsuits against our town due to anti-black
You have to
Wait.
start
police brutality.
somewhere. Where else will we start? What do you
Bring
suggest?
Weil into the process.
Wait,
No.
wait.
What do you suggest?
I suggest we bring the youth leaders who started this all into the process and give them a say in what happens. Don't just say thanks. We'll take it from here. Don't say thanks. We'll take it from here and do the opposite of what they
there's the
said.
email address, and they can send anything they want to us.
But don't say
And
thanks.
I
We'll take
will,
it from here and do the
and I
opposite of what
will,
they
and I will
recommended.
respond to it, okay? Just like in the beginning with the information that they gave us and the letters and everything that were written up. This is all in response to that, okay? This is why this is taking place.
So include
So there is changes that are being made. steps that are being taken, okay? Email us. So hopefully what you have coming forward are questions that we can answer here now. Not here to,
I'm here to ask the tough questions. Somebody.
you can ask, listen, you can ask a tough question, but long as it's a question pertaining to this summary.
And be advised, you may get a tough answer. That's all we're talking
Okay.
about. We're all on the same.
I'll take a
we're
tough
all-
answer over
we're
no
all
answer.
for the
Because
same
from the council, I get no
purpose.
answers. We
We're
get the
all
mayor
for-
one time.
We're
finally.
all for the same purpose.
Are we?
We're trying to,
Yes,
We're
yes, we
trying to
are.
get it right.
Yes, we are.
Then include why.
We're trying to
Then
get
include
it
the Woodbridge
right.
Youth for Liberation and Equity.
The starting off point,
According to who?
according to what's going on, the way things are done. We're going here, and then the next
According to
question,
the
then
mayor.
we'll start bringing
Okay,
people in.
so you're saying is your way is the only way?
Not my way.
No. You're here representing though.
I'm not representing them.
Well, then what are you here for?
I'm supporting them.
You're supporting, you're representing.
I'm not representing. I
You're
can only
supporting.
represent myself.
Come on.
I
Come
can only
on.
represent
Come on.
myself.
If you got questions pertaining to the summary, I will be more than glad to answer that for you. So throw it on me, man. Come on.
I guess my question was, do you really feel the summary is an adequate representation of this town? And I only saw one hand go up in
Well, I'm not
in the
talking
audience.
about what's in here.
The people
Okay?
who care about this issue.
In
many
reference,
people
if
in
you
town who
have
care about
questions in reference to the summary, I will direct that to Bill so we can answer that for you. Now, what you got?
Wait a minute, before he does, number one of the demands was, we demand that Woodbridge Township does not increase the number of police officers on
Right, and
duty
you're
for the
doing the
physical
opposite.
year. Wait, let me finish, sir. That was one of the questions asked. Someone in the audience said it was biased the way it was worded, but that was one of the demands of the group. You cannot deny that. That was one of the demands. And overwhelming the response, including the African American community, was supportive of not funding the police. All right, so
2/5 of
let's
1%.
clear the
That's
air
not really a
here.
fair
We're
representation.
talking about a survey. I'm not talking about other groups or community groups. Our commissioners have explained to you, this is the first step in the process. It's an anti-racist process, something that you have spoken about over and over again. Anybody who is anti-racist will either with their behavior or with their policies stand for and against racism. This is what's happening in this community. We're
throwing a
taking,
few more
I'm not
blacks into a
finished.
racist
I
system is
am
not
not
Let her
finished.
talk.
That's not going to help.
I'm
Yo.
not finished.
If you're gonna keep cutting her off, that ain't gonna happen, okay?
So what we're doing is taking steps, one by one. You're welcome to join the steps. As a matter of fact, I think it was, Virginia, correct me if I'm wrong, at one of the town council meetings, you said that this was not perhaps
Victoria.
the appropriate forum for a discussion.
Where is
I
that?
have,
Where is?
excuse me, I'm speaking. I have asked several people, wait after the meetings, we'll have a discussion. All right? They exited and left. All right? So you don't want to speak to me? That's fine. But the topic at hand is the survey. The question was who put the questions together, the administration and the firm of Mercury. Put the questions together. They're a bona fide group of individuals who do this for a living. They have a corporation that their integrity is based on doing polling. All right? Gary said this is the first step. We don't have a timeline yet, Mr. Green, because we haven't gone through this data page by page, and we have subcommittees meeting on it. I'm sorry we're not going fast enough for you, but we want to get it right. And that's what we're here to do. Not to argue about who said what and can we do it, and I'm texting this individual. No, that is not how it works. We have a baseline, and we're going to go forward with it. The mayor talked about lack of communication. Was surprised that the seniors, that of course younger people did not know about the activities of seniors. Well, my experience has been, unless it affects you personally, then maybe you don't care about it. If you're single and have no children, maybe you don't know what the school district does. So it's a big, complex issue that cannot be solved in an argument back and forth. I'll be glad to sit down with you anytime. You're more than welcome to call me up. I'm in the phone book, and we can discuss it. But right now, we're discussing the survey. So, sir, what is the question you have regarding the survey?
I guess that question is, why was the Woodbridge Youth for Liberation Equity not involved in the
That
process?
is not the question on the survey. The answer was asked.
I can
Was
ask any
answered.
question I
The
want.
mayor, the administration,
Why was there?
and Mercury formulated the questions. That's the answer.
And do you-
You don't like that answer, I'm sorry, but that is the answer.
All right, so right now is only questions for the survey. We'll have time for more questions that are related to police culture and specific incidents. We'll get to that eventually.
Not to no particular incidents. We're going to, in reference to the police, which I was trying to get to in the next subcommittee, those are questions that we can present to Gary in reference to a lot of the legislation and those issues that were passed. Okay, that's what I would like to get to next.
Were the two?
Yeah, if we can finish this part here right now.
I have a lot, but I won't get to it all, I guess.
Okay. Listen. We get together, you and me, we sit down, we talk.
I would like that.
Okay.
Because the council
You and me.
and mayor doesn't do that.
Okay, listen.
The mayor doesn't come to any council.
All right, well, and listen, he's here now, okay?
Fine.
And he's here to support what is taking place, and it's a positive thing for this township. And that's something that you should realize.
Is he going to?
Do you realize that?
I think, okay,
But
I realize.
I asked you a question. No, you keep asking me questions. I said, do you realize that?
Do I realize what?
That he's doing something very positive for
No,
this
no, I
township.
don't.
So
No.
you don't
We
realize
call
that.
Black Lives
Okay, no
Matter
problem.
awful. How's
You and
that
me need to
positive for
talk.
the
You and me
township?
need to talk. Okay? So let's end this Genova right now so we can move on to the next subject.
Can you
And
ask the mayor if he'll say Black Lives Matter once and for all?
Okay, no. Of course we're not going to.
Why
No,
not?
we're not going there.
At hand.
Yo,
That's not a
Brodsky,
question.
listen. I'm losing. I don't want to. I do not want to lose my certain respect for you. Okay? Come on. We will talk. All right? That's it. We will talk. So I am going to end the subcommittee portion of this public meeting for Kyle. Yes, Kyle. You okay? No, yeah. You can come up and speak, Kyle. All right. I will talk to you later, Mr. Dubowski.
Thank you.
Not a problem. Yes, Mr. Kyle.
I'm sure the mayor is thrilled that I'm coming up here to speak right now, but no,
Kyle,
because
That's
we're
an
extending this
implicit
night.
bias, so stop it right now.
What I want to say is, you know, Kyle Anderson, Colonial, New Jersey, and I'm a councilman here. When this was proposed, there was no one on the council that gave more pushback in regards to how this study was done, who was conducting the study, and other questions than me, all right? I gave a lot of pushback on this area.
I can second that motion.
I'm sorry?
I second that motion.
So, and we've been through a lot in this last 6 to 8 months. We've been through a lot in the community. We've been through a lot in regards to the formation of the Human Rights Commission. And a lot of questions have come up about our police department. I come from a pharmaceutical background. I know Bob Lauer also came from a pharmaceutical background. We actually worked at the same company. When it comes to study design and methodology, this is right on. And I loved your analogy of, you know, taking a ladle of soup. That was perfect. 400 people, when you talk about, I know we do have some people here that were surveyed, or at least had family members that were surveyed. It is a beginning. It's a beginning point. The mayor and I were not always on the same page when it came to the entire study itself. However, I view this as a positive step, and I am supportive of him on this. All right, we are very supportive of what is going on here. As far as the resolution goes, I know that that's another thing, but that's also a positive step. We need a shot in the arm in our police department, pardon the expression. We do need an immediate impact, and the resolution will do that. It's how we use the resolution, and we're going to wait until more things are pushed down from the Senate and from New Jersey on how we're going to go forward with that resolution. But we do want the entire community to support it. This public statement, the mayor and I was involved. I was pleased that he asked me, how did it go? What do you think of this presentation? It was the first time I've seen it, but as far as the language itself, he involved me in that, and I was glad that he did that. So I view this as a positive step in a positive direction. We were not always on the same page, and a lot of times we were in disagreement with how things were going. But I believe that this is a positive step, and we're moving forward. We have a long way to go.
Yeah,
when it
chapter
comes to
1. It's only chapter 1.
Yeah, we have a long way to go. I believe that most of the people here realize that, but they have questions with how it was done, because we need to understand. And I was glad that Denise brought up the point that will the public have the opportunity once they digest this,
Right.
and once this has been publicized, because there are going to be a lot of questions. But I think we're here to understand and learn about it, ask our questions, because and then it'll help as we go forward in informing the community.
And
But
so-
I view this as a very positive step in the right direction. There are some things, obviously, on what we call supportive in the survey. If less than, to me, if less than 70% are in support of something, then we need to examine it a little closer. And I'm also in the understanding of we need to go further into where if someone feels discriminated against, like the mayor pointed out, 4% people, if they feel discriminated against, we want to understand why.
Exactly.
The study doesn't let us understand that, but we're going to go into those communities, as Carrie pointed out, where most of our black and brown residents are in Avenel. And if they're pointing out that social justice is a major issue, we need to get into Avenel and find out what's going on. Where is that
Totally
coming
agree
from?
with you.
So I just want to thank everybody for coming out tonight. I know that this was a very important study that we've all anticipated. I do believe that the WILD group has been heard in that the mayor has cited the WILD group and mentioned that they're I want to say, motivation behind why we spent $75,000 to examine this.
Okay.
And going forward, we're hopeful. I know we've been in negotiation about having a sit down with that group, specifically with the WILD group, and having a sit down. And that, to me, will be the second step. And we have to continue that. And, it's just about having open dialogue and having an open mind.
Yep, communication. Thank you, Kyle. Okay.
Chairman, may I say two things?
Yes.
One is, Mr. Green, as the chair of this subcommittee, I will try to work with Dan in the mayor's office and our subcommittee to come up with a proposed timeline for some actionables, those really high leverage things from this. So by our next meeting, I don't want to overpromise and underdeliver, but I'll work toward that because I think action is important. And secondly, it seems that this, I had statistics for the social science person in college, so I have very little understanding really of statistics, but I do understand what you're saying, that that's an accurate portrayal of the community. What it does not measure is particular pain points in groups and individuals that might not be reflected the intensity of the pain. So it seems that this is really valuable and it is a starting point, but perhaps one of the other things to be addressed would be, where are the pain points and how do we listen well to one another? This comes up over and over again, to actually see some healing happen, so that we can move forward together. So I think that needs to be said, that it doesn't reflect the pain in the community, and that's what we have to get to in addition to the good data that this brings. So.
Genova Burns, Mercury, questions? No. Oh, okay. All right. All right. All right. All right. At this point in time now, I'll close out the Genova Burns survey questions. And now we'll entertain Commissioner Gary White's subcommittee report.
Actually, my question is about the hiring in Woodbridge. I understand it's been brought up several times that we are a civil service test. Who determines that we are a civil? I mean, I think it was mentioned that only half of New Jersey police forces are based on the civil service, and if we have seen that there is a lack of diversity in the past, and it's been brought up in the past, the answer has always been, well, there's nothing we can do, our hands are tied, prior to this legislation, which I think is a great step in the right direction. But if we acknowledge that it was an issue before, who determines the hiring that we use in our police force? And could that have been changed previous to this legislation?
I don't know if I don't know if the mayor.
Mr. Chairman, yes.
Yeah, I was going to see if the mayor could answer that.
We have been a civil service town for as long as I've been involved, and that goes back to January 1st of 1992. We are. That's it. We would have to, I think, do a referendum to not be at this point.
So, but it could have, I mean, it is something that, leadership, administration could have influenced.
And to get out of civil service?
I'm asking, I'm genuinely asking.
I think we would have to literally do a referendum to get out of it.
And that's a vote, right? So
yes,
okay.
But I'm not interested in getting out of it.
Okay.
Excuse me, Mr. Mayor, can you explain why civil service is important?
Actually, what is the other option?
Why is it?
Well,
it can be a double-edged sword, but what are some of the good points of civil service?
Wow. In police departments, other towns like Edison, which is very demographically similar to us, they have what they call a chief's test. They can give any test they want, and they can interview people, and they can hire whoever they want. Mm-hmm. It doesn't even have to be the highest person on the test. Yeah. They can just do whatever they want to hire police officers.
And I see an issue in that as well.
And that you might argue it's good. You might argue it's not so good, because certainly you can have more nepotism that way. Certainly you have less nepotism if you can only hire people off a list. There's a whole lot of reasons why you want to be civil service. We're civil service for the whole town, by the way, not just the police force.
Yeah.
If we hire clerks, if we hire anybody, they go through a civil service process, they get assigned a title, and sometimes the test is called, sometimes the test is not called, but we're not just civil service for police. I think all but 90 employees in our town out of 1,200 are civil service. It's got its good, it's got its bad, and we have it now, and we have to work within it.
I'm glad we have another option to address. It just seems like if you know something is restricting you from making an improvement, prior to this legislation, we were told several times that we were restricted from increasing diversity in the police force because of this. So if you know something's, I guess, putting limitations on you, I was just curious if it had ever been explored to make a change.
Not seriously, because be careful what you ask for, you might get it.
You might get diversity.
No, you might get a system that's not giving you what you want. I don't think I want to be a town that can hire anybody I want.
I'm not saying that, but you already have a system that everyone was acknowledging was limiting.
Right, and the state addressed that. The state gave us an avenue to get around that, so to speak, and we hope we can implement that.
Okay. I just wanted clarification on one of the points in the statement that was made. You said that anybody who was brought onto the police force through this alternate route would not be included in the overall number, right? Something along those lines, right?
Well, if we say 220,
Yeah.
and we hire 3 people off the alternative route, the 3 people who are next on the list who didn't get hired could say that the alternative route program cost them a chance to be a police officer. In order to avoid that, if we hire 3 more, we'll up our number to 223, so that those 3 people that were next on the list can't say, your plans cost me a chance to be a police officer. We'll go above 220 by whatever we have hired through the alternate route program. Because a lot of people say, what about this kid's next on the list, this young man, this young lady's next on the list? They're going to get hurt for everybody you hire off the list without using the list. They'd be right. So we'll just increase that number so that won't happen.
So then what is your incentive to utilize this alternative route?
To get diversity. We have almost 10% black population and 22% Indian population. We have less than 3% black police officers and less than 4% Asian police officers.
I'm just trying to understand
And I
when
don't
you would
think the
make...
civil service process will get us where we need to go. Because for a lot of reasons I don't really want to get into, but it just won't let us get there anytime soon.
Okay. I'm trying to understand when you would make the distinction between which routes you would hire.
Well, we would hire people, first of all, they have to have gone through the academy.
Right.
And they have to have passed, which is, I think, a heck of a lot better measure if somebody's going to be a good cop than a test. If you get through the academy and you pass a drug test, it's like, oh, you're ready to be a cop. I don't care what you got on a test. I care that you passed the academy. So at that point, we would put people through the normal hiring process. We would interview them. We would check their backgrounds. We would implement the series of tests that we do, and we would make sure they're legitimately qualified to be a police officer in Woodbridge Township.
Right. So you gave the example of hiring 3 people off of this alternate route.
I just made up a number. I didn't say we're doing 3.
Arbitrarily.
Right.
Right. That number. At what point will you, I'm trying to gauge, at what point would you cap?
We don't know. It depends on the budget every year. It depends on state aid every year. It depends on how much taxes we're willing to raise or not raise every year.
Right.
It goes into the whole mix of the budget and all the different constraints. I mean, is our permits up and down? Is interest up and down? Court fines up or down? Other spending up or down? It's all a big package. So right now, we're just going to try to get started. The next budget starts on July 1st. I don't know what we'll put in for the program yet, but we'll make that decision pretty close to then.
Okay. So there's no limit to the amount of police that you could potentially hire through this program, and diversity is contingent upon how big your police budget is.
No, diversity is a goal regardless, but how many we hire is subject to the budget. The budget doesn't limit our goals to be diverse.
Right.
The budget limits how many police officers we can hire, period.
Yes.
Through the program or not through the program, it limits how many people we can hire. We have a goal.
Yes, but if you have a goal of the next 5 police officers in the next year or so, right? Like you said, you're trying to reach the number of 20 police officers. You only have that much money to hire X amount of police officers, but you need to hire twice as many. Do you see what I'm saying? Like
No.
half of...
We have a budget right now in the current fiscal year, which ends June 30th, to get to 215.
Yeah.
We're at 207 a week ago. Somebody retired, now we're at 206. I think we have 7 in the academy, which means we're going to be at, give or take, 213 when the year ends. Then, when we do the next budget, we're going to budget to get to 220.
Right.
And we will put the money in for people, depending on when the academy is. It's either 6 months or 9 months or 3 months, whatever. And then we will decide how many people we want to hire on the alternate route program, and put that money in the budget, and then implement that plan. There's
Right.
nobody we're going to hire an alternate route between now and June 30th because the law's not even effective yet.
Right.
So when we do the budget, we start typically now, we have documents out for people to start telling us what they want. We will make that decision, introduce the budget in probably August or September, adopt it in either September or October, and that will reflect how many alternate route people we want to have in the next fiscal year by next June 30th of 2022.
So that budgeting will be under the police budget total, or will it be a separate?
It's in a grand total, but the detail is broken out in schedules of each employee and their salary. And there'll be a line, like it says this year, I forget if it was 7, 8, or 9, but it says new police officers.
Yeah.
You don't have names yet.
Yeah.
And then in July or August, we'll submit a budget with new police officers, and it'll include how many we want to do on the alternate route. And we'll make it clear when we explain our budget, how many we want to hire on the alternate route. It'll be completely transparent.
Okay. Do you recognize the concern here of your diversity being contingent on the budget?
Well, everything's contingent on the budget.
Right. Right.
Yeah, having 200 police officers is contingent on the budget. So in 2009, we were cut $6 million in state aid. I don't know what would have happened if we didn't implement the new garbage trucks, which cut the number of public works workers we need.
Yeah.
And then we did an early retirement plan, so a lot of people took the early retirement, and a lot of the garbage workers moved into other public works positions as custodians or sewer workers or parks workers or whatever, and we managed to not lay anybody off because we had that room be created by the early retirement plan and because of the garbage cans and the new system with the one-armed truck, which needed only one person instead of 3. Everything worked out great. We lost $6 million in state aid and didn't lay anybody off.
Right.
If we lost $6 million in state aid tomorrow for the next budget, I can't even say we'd be at 220. I don't know what we do with public works. I don't know what we do with health. I don't know what we would do. So I can't make any predictions about the next budget until I know the revenues and what everything looks like in terms of what we need to spend. We put it all together and we come up with a plan. I can't commit to anything now on April 12th or what it might be like July 1st.
Right.
But we're committed to diversity, without a doubt.
I technically hear you.
You know, you've called me before. I'm happy to talk to you if you want to give me a buzz.
Yep.
I mean, I'm an accountant. I talk like an accountant. I can't help that.
Right. Right. I'm just concerned about this tit for tat. One from the civil service, one from the ARP.
Yeah, they're different. They're two different groups. I hope when they all work here, they're one big group.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's just hard to make commitments now for what the next budget might look like.
No, I hear you. Okay.
Mayor, I'm only making this comment for the group. In 1999, I was actively pursuing becoming a police officer. I took the civil service exam. All right, back then, they offered a pretest called the Del Bagno pretest, and it was named after some police officer down at State Police. I paid over $500 at the time to take that pretest. They gave you the test from 2 years before. They literally gave you the test with the answers. That was it. It was no lecture or anything. It was the test and the answers. Just memorize it. That year, they obviously changed the test on me, right? They changed the test. They decided to change the test. They did. They changed the test. Now that pretest is $2,500. Okay? So when you talk about discrimination, economical discrimination, and you talk about civil service, that's one of the things that probably eliminates a lot of young people that are financially disadvantaged from taking the test. All right? And in the alternate route, as they pointed out, people are they're foregoing their own finances. They're not getting paid while they're in the academy. So that also is somewhat of a challenge for a young person that wants to be a police officer. But on my way here, I was talking to the superintendent, the future superintendent of Woodbridge, Mr. Massimino. His brother is the chief of police for Berkeley Heights. He actually is an alternate route police officer, right? He didn't go through the civil service. It's not just for minorities. Councilman Ficarra's son is a police officer. He's a detective in another town. He's also an alternate route. So sometimes, you know, it really works for people to do it that way. But in civil service, there are some things that really eliminate. When you get these guys that are getting 98s and 99s, some of them are smart guys. They're test takers. Not everybody's a test taker. And, you know, some guys are just great test takers, but doesn't mean you're going to be a great police officer. All right? So there are some things about the civil service test that I think that leave us to where we are right now with our statistics or with our demographics in our police department. I just wanted to add that on there because I actually was one who took the test, and I did okay, but I didn't get that 99 because I took the pre-test, and then they changed the test on us that year. And everybody that, you know, that it's my age remembers that, you know, when that happened. And then I just, you know, it didn't work out for me to become a police officer. But I actively pursued it, and that was a big challenge for me. Could I come up with the $500 to pay for the test? Now it's $2,500. How many young people are out there with $2,500 to spare and can go to the police academy, you know, and not be paid during that time? So there's a lot of challenges out there. Yeah.
Good.
You know, there's a footnote to that, Kyle, in that, Mr. Mayor, you just said that if they're going the alternate route, all right, they will be if they're not sponsored, then it's 6 months without pay. Did you not say that?
That's a big challenge.
So, you know, that too could complement or complicate, excuse me, people from diverse backgrounds that have limited funds going that route as well. But there's other things, scholarships in the plan, all right, and things like that. But that's down the road. That's not law. Gary, am I right? It's not law right now?
It's not law as of yet.
As of yet. So there will be other things available, but, you know, it could backfire as to the number of individuals that have you know, that are in financial straits going that route.
We could also identify a candidate in advance, interview them, put them through the test, our test, not the civil service test, and sponsor them in the academy and pay them while they go to the academy.
Okay,
Under the alternative plan. Nothing stops us from doing that. Find the person right now, young man, young woman, that meets our demographics that we're looking for, and make sure they're qualified like we do any recruit. Send them to the academy, cover their salary while they're there like we do our regular recruits who don't use the alternate route. Let's treat them all the same. We could do that.
Thank you. I was just going to ask that, if there would be scholarships available. I have another question in light of what you talked about, Gary. The implicit bias law that was passed, the training for police, how is that different than what training they've been getting? Like, how is that going to help police officers across New Jersey with their implicit bias? Do you know?
One of the greatest things about training is it's ongoing. This specifically says the major change as a result of this legislation, which was signed into law in August 2020, was a mandate to address implicit bias. Implicit is being biased against someone and you're not even really realizing it. You know, somebody calls you a specific name or says a specific slur. That's not implicit, that's in your face. But implicit are the little quiet things. Oh, you know how they are. Or, you know, they're different. We can't let them have a wedding here. But it's okay, but not here. That's an implicit bias. So we're trying to address, the law is trying to address, is defined as a predefined attribution of particular qualities by an individual to a member of some social outgroup, meaning someone different from them. So now, a lot of times there are people who have good intentions that still exhibit implicit bias because they don't know any better. It's not that they're necessarily hateful, but they don't know any better. This will help educate. It's all about education. It's all about feeding knowledge into people who don't have it. So that, as it goes, hopefully will help in some of the interactions in the field for a field police officer.
And that curriculum is being developed now. It's not in place.
Right, because when the police officers were here, they talked about the training they got that included implicit bias training. So I wondered how they were coming at it a different way, and perhaps no one here would really know how to answer that because you can't see both of those curriculums. So anyway, that's okay.
Any other questions in reference to the Gary Police
legislation that come up that has that I mentioned as I was talking that you probably were ignoring me.
police legislation?
And I apologize, James Dabrowski, Woodbridge. Obviously, I get very emotional. If you've been paying attention to the council meetings, you know.
It's all right, man.
Okay. But I guess my ultimate question is the goal to get to concrete, systemic, structural anti-racism policies that actually get to the root of systemic racism and attempt to dismantle it, or are we going to just stop at the surface level, like symbolic policies? We can have diversity, but that does nothing without inclusion, equity, justice. The root of the problem, white supremacy is the root of the problem. That's the system we live in. We have to work on dismantling. We have to name it, number one. We can't be afraid to name it. And then we have to work at actively dismantling it. Are we going to get to that level? Is that the ultimate goal? I guess that's my question.
I think so. I would say yes. All right, and that's what this methodology is attempting to do right now. When you say systemic, it means the entire system. And what this commission is doing, if you haven't attended all the meetings, but you've attended quite a few. We're looking at each department. We're looking at the services. Is there a problem? Is there an issue? Is a group underserved? And in order to do that, we have to evaluate what we have. So, eventually, the goal is up here. You could legislate anything, but if it's not in the mind and hearts of the people, it's not going to work.
Well, that's the thing. I think policy shapes
training,
hearts and minds, not the other way around.
Policies and training, looking at things through a hard lens, will eventually, it is my hope, get us to that goal.
Okay, and then my second question, you mentioned, Wiles not here, they'd like to be virtually. This is the Human Rights Commission meeting. I think this is a valid question. In compliance with the ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act, don't you think we should maybe consider having virtual meetings so we can be more inclusive of all Woodbridge residents? And can we get the council meetings on board with that too? This is the Human Rights Commission. You would think we would try to make a better effort to
I can't
include everyone.
speak for the council, but we as a Human Rights Commission, we can talk about.
No, but you're charged with making recommendations to the council, right? So you can kind of try to get, right? Isn't that your charge, to recommend policies to the council?
We make recommendations.
Can you make
mayor,
that recommendation?
And then hold
and
meetings
then from
virtually.
Yes, because we're in a global pandemic, but also because we have people who are disabled, who are immunocompromised, who would like to be here and partake in this important discussion but can't. Students who are away at college.
You got my number, right?
I do.
We'll be talking.
I appreciate
all right, and we'll talk about that Zoom.
I appreciate that.
You got
it. I believe it was pointed out in the survey that was a concern, that people had
right. We have very little
concerned.
transparency.
Okay.
Regardless of what the survey says, we have very little transparency.
Okay. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I want you to realize something that we've all dealt with and we all acknowledge. We are trying to rebuild a system that has been in place over 400 years. That's not going to happen overnight. We can want it this way, we can ask it that way, and we can demand it that way, but it takes time. It took time to build, it takes time to dismantle. We're taking a brick from here and moving it to this brick. Okay? This is our first brick. Okay? And to rebuild a society, which is what we're eventually trying to do. But you have to start somewhere. We start on a grassroots level. You know that. We're not going to solve America's problems in this council chamber. We can come up with some answers to solve our problems of our township. We can start there. Then we can expand. That's what the goal is. You can't change the world overnight. A lot of people have to die off. Let's be honest. A lot of thought processes have to be rearranged. All these different things that are going to take time, and it's going to take work. I challenge you, Mr. Green, join us. We will join you, because it takes everybody's effort. Every lady and gentleman in this room, if we don't work together, we're gonna die separately.
That's right.
We're not adversaries. We might have a different method. We might not be moving as fast as you may want us to, but we're working for the same thing. The diversity, that's tough. Remember, who's old here? Yeah, there's a couple of old people here. Remember affirmative action when it first came out?
Watch it.
Hey, oh, I'm sorry, seasoned. Affirmative action. When that first came out, that legislation came up. What is affirmative action? Anybody really know? It's reverse discrimination, people. You take from over here to put over there. Does it sound fair to that person that's being taken from? No. But in order to...
It's not a road you want to...
No. I will go down that road so we can talk... Listen, here, you won't let me finish again, Green. Listen, it is. Hold on, let me finish. You can come over, you can come in my smoking lounge and we can talk about that.
I'm gonna be there too.
Technically, that's what it is. I don't care if you disagree with me or not. I don't care if you disagree with me or not. But that's what it is. However, it is a necessary evil to give an opportunity for a man or a woman who has been discriminated against historically. All right? That's reality. However, as we move forward, that has been less of an issue, because now, in a lot of circles, it's still not perfect, because it's not going to be perfect, because we're still moving those bricks. Okay? All we do is keep trying. We keep working together. We actually got the same idea. But the bottom line is we try to work somewhat in the system, and I'm tired of young men getting killed or pepper sprayed. That's what I have a problem with. I don't care who says what. I just want that to stop. And the only thing I can have an effect on or we could have an effect on as a committee is our township, that it doesn't happen here. And then maybe, just maybe, somebody will say, well, hey, maybe that town's got a good idea. What did they do? Then that, and it spreads like flowers in a field. Seeds. I almost used the word virus, but I felt that wasn't apropos. But if we can move and give an example and show other people, hey, it can be done, then we'll do it.
And on the other side, we can take from more progressive towns who are way ahead of us and follow their example as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. The best ideas are stolen. Okay? If you got a good idea, if we don't know it, hey, let's try that. That's fine.
So I think everybody in this room could distill in 10 minutes without a survey, challenge that this committee faces. But we have to do a survey to face on it, right? That's what I'm so eager to get to, what we're going to get to, because we know what we're getting to. Because the questions were aimed at the things that we already know we wanted to tackle. So we just spent $75,000 to get to a place where we already know where we are, right? That being said, we spent it. I'm just eager to get to the output because we already know what the outputs are. Now, once we get the outputs, let's put some energy around those things you're talking about, the creative ideas that get us where we need to do. But here's what I challenge you. Here's where I don't think we are on complete alignment. I would submit to you, some folks in leadership don't think there are any problems. Before I can talk about fixing anything, I got to get somebody to a place of awareness to where they can say, you know what, I didn't think there was a problem. And it took me a survey to get to a place so I realized there might be a problem, but it ain't as bad as it really is, because really it's only 4%, whether it's representative or not representative, it's kind of irrelevant. We got to all know, because Woodbridge is a microcosm of this country, right? It's no different than anywhere else. I was going to ask the loaded question that if you took that same survey in Ferguson or you took it in Minnesota, you could come up with the same kind of data results that we got here, but you can't tell me there's not a problem going on in Minnesota right now.
Oh, absolutely.
Right. So the point I'm trying to make, we can do what we're doing, right? Or we can cut to the chase. And then we can sit around the table like we're doing right now. This is the kind of forum that I love to have. Sit around the table collectively and say, what are the things we really have to deal with? Is there any low-hanging fruit that even from an optics perspective, we can change? Right? Maybe the legislation from the state allows us to do that, right? It says, okay, that's what I said. If you don't have in mind how many African-American police officers you want, but you already have in mind how big you want to grow the force, you haven't given any thought to that. You need to go give some thought to that. Right? It's like, ideally, I'd like to have 3 more African-American by 2020. Like you say, I want to grow to 220. I want to have at least, by 220, I want 3 more on my force. Whether I get that through alternate route or not. Right? It's not rocket science. So we say, okay, well, how do we do that? Maybe we sponsor somebody. Somebody doesn't have the money, but you got a good candidate.
Right. And that's something that was brought up and talked about.
Right. We could put $200 a piece up and pay for somebody to get through. If we're that committed.
You know what? I think that's a great idea.
I'm just saying.
No. I'm not mocking you at all. I don't mock. I talk. Listen, if this is the kind of dialogue we need to have.
I've been saying that since the first city council meeting from day one.
Okay.
Can we get to a discourse and can come up with some good ideas and go execute against
But it don't always happen like this. Do you know this spontaneously? Wait a minute. No, I'm sorry, but this spontaneously broke out, and this is great.
No, but I'm saying it didn't have to be spontaneous. It could have been intentional a year ago. Because that's what I've been saying. We need to sit down just like this, find out what the 5 things are we want to go tackle, and go tackle them.
Okay, you got my contact information,
I got
right?
it.
You got my contact information.
You got
I
mine, too.
challenge you.
I'm not gonna let this week go out. Just on affirmative action, you're gonna get a call from me tomorrow.
Damn right. Come on.
Just on that.
Come on.
Just
Come
on
on with it. Come on with it. And I will debate that with
He's
you. But
asking
yeah.
for a public forum where we could all chat since before y'all existed in this group.
Right, but we're here now. So it took us a minute to get
That's
this.
that's the step.
Right.
And that's what the youngsters did. The youngsters spurred this on.
But to his point.
But the thing is,
that conversation we're having right now, if you put 2 of them in the room and we can keep them from yelling, right? So there's some coaching that need to go on as well. To keep them from being hypersensitive to things like idea of calling something not a demand, but called I forgot what you
grievance,
right?
yeah.
And not lose your mind behind someone who wants to change the nomenclature so it's more digestible, right?
Well, you know what? You know what got me twisted around the axle? I hate the term defund the police. And the reason why is because there's so many people who misinterpreted it and used it as a propaganda tool to turn people against the entire original idea. So those words do matter.
Right.
So
see, if we have a conversation like this, I really do believe this, and this is where aspirationally I want to get us, because it's gonna make his world when this happens. We can sit around this table and talk about what Black Lives Matters really means and what the movement really is.
Yes.
And all come away with an agreement of what it is and what it is not.
Right.
And have everybody in the room walk out there going, I'm supportive of that.
But this guy called it awful when he left. Like that's unacceptable.
But
He
no,
said
it's
it's awful.
but see,
He said, I won't say it, it's awful.
Right.
Why are you getting wrapped around that axle?
Because that's our mayor of our town.
He showed up.
But
He hadn't shown up before. That's the start.
Finally, and he left early. Why?
No, okay.
Yeah,
Just a minute
take
now.
the small victories when you can. Just look.
You cannot win a war in one day. You cannot win. You gotta win battles to get to the ultimate goal of peace.
I wouldn't even be concerned about him saying it or calling it awful or any of that nonsense because he is gonna believe what he's gonna believe and he's gonna do what he's gonna do.
He's a mayor who has cultural competence.
Oh,
To say that, that's
you and I are on the same page with that.
Yeah.
Right, so.
You and I are on the same page with that.
So yeah, see, this we can spar all day on this as well. Every politician that's not retiring is looking to get reelected.
That's what
Every
he told me that.
politician is a mathematician.
He said, I won't take a stand against racism because it will piss off half my town. I have to get reelected. He said that.
Yeah,
I have it on tape. I'll
But let
show
me
it.
ask you a question. If that was your objective, well, how would you think?
That's not my
You
agenda.
might not say that out loud. You might be smart enough not to say that out loud.
No, but that's not. That's not a leader.
But
That's a
no,
coward.
you're going the difference between what's a leader and what's a politician, and all leaders do things differently. If you don't think that there's compromises being made that go against people's principles, it happens every day. Right? But I'm not going to debate that here either. The fact of the matter is, I'm glad we're having this little small exchange. It's a step in the right direction. I think we should continue the discourse. I think we should maybe create some time that we don't do it like here.
Right.
Maybe we do it somewhere else. And to your point, maybe it's over a cup of coffee. A couple of us, right? A cup of coffee.
We asked about that.
Virginia.
Right? We've been asking about it. The last meeting that we had with the police officers, they were so open to talk to us. And then we don't want to make it a political thing. We wanted to just make it a simple, some residents want to sit and talk to you, not to bash you, because I think we started at a good place and we lost that momentum. And it's not about, like, we want to get you in a place so we can talk about how we're angry with you. I think the problem is that people are not listening to each other.
Right.
You can have your time to talk, and it is how you present your ideas.
Absolutely.
Right? You can still get your point across, but like, what's the point if you're going to make someone angry and you're not going to get your point across?
Well, that's something that you brought up that I will definitely look into and try to create that venue. Definitely.
So, but the point is
Okay.
too, I don't want to make it a political,
Oh,
organized
no,
meeting. I
no,
want to make it
no.
courtesy,
That's right. That's what I'm about. And I've had several meetings with them individually, not in this forum. You know, I've had it right at my clubhouse as well. We've had.
Great that we started out with a meeting and a conversation broke out.
But sometimes, like I think with the format of the commission meeting, even in the council meetings,
Right.
there's different.
I know.
But for here,
I know.
like sometimes we get more accomplished with these informal conversations.
Right.
when you do
Absolutely.
go to the
Absolutely.
mic, say where you're from,
Yeah.
and you have a couple of minutes, sit down, and then you may have something else that you want to talk about. Okay, I have to get back up, go back over to the mic, and then I may forget my thought. But here, I think we've accomplished a lot more in the last 10 minutes than we probably did for the complete meeting. Like meaningful conversation. So we need
Absolutely.
more opportunities where we can just have an open
Right.
conversation, open dialogue.
And that was my basically commitment from the very beginning when we started this. And I don't know if you understood that or recognized that. You know what I mean? It was about inclusiveness. You know, and I want to get together. And I've had many meetings with individual police officers and chiefs. You know, already. We had a meeting with one of the police officers right over Gary's house the other day. And we're just sitting down and talking. But that was just the beginning. You know? Well, just trying to plant the seeds everywhere. You know what I mean? And let everything blossom. But it takes time.
An event that was like ages ago, I think during the height of the Black Lives Matter summer, where there was like coffee with a cop or something. And I saw that sign happen. I drove past it, and I laughed because I was like, "This town is not ready for a conversation like that." But like, I think,
But that's the thing, like, the officers who were here, we had like an open forum, they agreed to it. But then after the meeting, I talked with them, and they were more than willing to have that conversation. Yeah, but then it just fell off.
Right. Well, we have had some of those conversations with them, and like I said, I'm trying to plant the seeds, and I'm trying to create that where now, okay, next step.
So
Inclusion.
Glenn, do you think, because I don't know it to be true, because I haven't had that conversation I'm going to have. Do you think that we have a challenge between the community and the police? Do you think there's any challenge there?
A little bit.
Right, so,
Yeah,
I mean,
just
there is.
Yeah, there's a little bit of, yeah.
But just think that, and I would love to hear them say, we think we have some challenges as well. We don't think we're respected.
Right.
Or we think that the folks are looking at us a certain way that we're not, and then we can have a conversation around why that may or may not be. Some of that may be perception, some of it may be reality, and somewhere it can be a blend of the two, right? I had the question, somebody answered it for me, actually Reverend Donna answered it for me. I said, you know, can Black Lives Matter and Blue Lives Matter coexist in the same room? I thought that it could, but then Donna kind of shared with me, she said, well, Blue Lives Matter was a reaction to Black Lives Matter. I'd like to get underneath that. I would love to understand their perception of where Blue Lives Matter came from and why was it necessary, right? Why did they believe it was necessary? Because I don't understand it. If that was really a reaction to saying Black Lives Matter, then somebody needs to explain to me, why did you think there was a need for that? Did you have to show solidarity to your brethren who were being attacked? Maybe. But then, is there anything in you that says some of the things that are going wrong are just wrong? Or is it just putting out flat? If the police did it, then it's right.
That was completely adversarial.
Right.
Blue Lives Matter. That was adversarial. Period. Okay, you actually see they don't give a damn about police officers either. January 6th proved that. Okay, so that was just a prop or propaganda, so you can band together for because they were against the people that you're against. Okay, so that's what that was. And besides, there is no blue life. It's a job. Because you go home, that man takes that uniform off, he's just a man at home relax. I can't take this off. I can't stop being black. So there's no,
that's the
what
level of
is
conversation we need to be having to say, do you understand that?
But
And
see,
have
the
somebody-
problem
Because
is,
all I'm trying to get to is acknowledgement. If I can get you to acknowledgement, I can get you to how do I change behavior?
but see,
if
but
I
you're
can't get you
preaching
to
to,
acknowledge that something's wrong.
but see, remember now, we're on this, you're preaching to the choir.
Agreed.
And everybody in this room is pretty much on the same page.
The person who walked out early to be in conversations like this.
But
is the
then-
head of the police.
but we'll get
But
We'll
he
get-
has had conversations like that. You don't think we've brought that to him?
With you.
Yeah.
It needs to be.
Okay.
Okay, well,
He
first,
showed up for the first time. He showed up for the first time. That's a start. Okay? This is reality
okay.
here.
And reality is I'm gonna make a motion to close the meeting, and we can still talk, okay? So moved, okay? Okay. There's no need for yays and nays either. We're closed.
Hey, Gary, I'm gonna hit you with this, and we'll talk more tomorrow. But him being in that seat today, to me, and this is an optic thing, this is Don's interpretation, was really about